Okay, how are we all doing this morning? Good, right? Alhamdulillah. Oh, I thought I was halfway through. I'm not even halfway through with my slides. All right, we'll probably take the full day then. Let's see. Let's see how it goes. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسوله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. All right. So yesterday we ended off with our own group discussion on marijuana, CBD, THC, and then today we're going to go into the scholarly analysis of it. Bismillah. So, what are CBD and THC? They both come from the same plant, the marijuana plant, the cannabis plant. It has it has high concentrations of two main chemicals, which would be tetrahydrocannabinol, probably saying that wrong, and cannabidiol. Okay, so THC and CBD are the high concentrations of chemicals. So initially, scholars outlawed marijuana as impermissible because if you use the plant as a whole, you will get THC and CBD and all of it in it. If you were to smoke it, which is the main way of consuming it, you would get both the THC and CBD, and therefore it would lead to intoxication. So marijuana was deemed impermissible. Then, as time passed, people started separating pieces of it. And now that they are separating THC and CBD, and it's become sort of more widespread, the scholars they had to be able to react to the contemporary issue. Okay, so their reaction to the contemporary issue was, if we were to look at CBD and THC as two separate entities, two separate sets of chemicals, THC is psychoactive, causes consumers to alter their experience of reality, causing them to become intoxicated. Whereas CBD does not have the same effect. I want to draw for you guys what qiyas looks like, okay? So qiyas is analogy, all right? Qiyas or analogy is one of the methodologies of arriving at a conclusion when the issue at hand is new. Okay, the issue at hand is new. So marijuana doesn't exist at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And so we can't just say, hey, we know the ruling immediately off the bat. No, because it doesn't exist. We don't say, hey, off the bat, it's okay. We ask ourselves through the process of understanding this new drug or this new plant, what are its effects? What does it do? And do I have precedence of something similar to it or analogous to it being prohibited? So it's very simple. You have an issue, A, okay? That would be alcohol, okay? More specifically, khamar, which is alcohol that is fermented grapes, also some other few things that are fermented, that the process of fermenting this food causes intoxication when consumed. Okay, so khamar is it's important to know the word is khamar, not so much alcohol. Okay, and then A leads to A, because of its iskar, which means intoxication, leads to the ruling of haram. Okay, so here is, you have A, and then its X factor, which is iskar, which is haram, right? So now your question is, I've got a new issue, C, okay, and that new issue is THC, okay? A psychoactive drug, okay, that causes a high. The question is, does it have the same X factor? If yes, it'll have the same ruling. It'll also have the ruling B. If it doesn't have the same X factor, the thing which made it haram, then it won't carry the same ruling. So because THC is intoxicating, right? Medical professionals went and researched it, said, look at the way the brain interacts with this drug. There is a clouding of judgment, etc., etc. Maybe not exactly the same way, but similarly enough, analogous. If there is iskar, then the ruling moves over. Same ruling, haram. Okay? Which is why, if we were not talking about THC, we're talking about a different drug, CBD, and therefore the X factor, iskar, is dropped, meaning CBD does not cause intoxication. CBD maybe causes an element of numbness, right? So people often put CBD in, you can take CBD gummies, you can take CBD tinctures, you could probably smoke CBD, you can do topical CBD, and it creates sort of a numbing effect, sort of like, Bengay helps muscles, and certain like nerve creams help nerves to calm down. CBD may help some numbing of certain symptoms, but not numbing to the point of iskar, where it intoxicates. So because CBD would not hold the same X factor, then you can no longer call it haram. It becomes mubah or halal, permissible. Okay. So here's a question. A lot of people actually categorize smoking and alcohol in the same category. Let's take it as a case study. Okay, so let's remove these three things. We'll ask ourselves, are smoking and alcohol the same? So alcohol, its X factor, what we call in fiqh is the illah, the thing that makes it have its ruling, is intoxication. Therefore, anything that intoxicates is haram. Okay, so then we have smoking tobacco. And so let's talk about tobacco. Tell me, Taha, does tobacco cause iskal, intoxication? Okay. Okay.
They would argue that nicotine is
Nicotine is
cigarettes. They feel harder.
Okay, so Taha mentioned by experience of others, not of himself, he mentioned, very important. Just kidding. Nicotine actually acts as a stimulant, sharpens the mind. Okay. Has anyone ever argued for nicotine being an intoxicant? That after you smoke, your mind is unclear, you shouldn't operate vehicles. What do you guys think? Not tobacco. Not tobacco, no. Okay. Okay, so what does that mean? The ruling of iskal does not exist for tobacco. And so the ruling, according to some scholars, is they don't say halal, they say makruh. They say it's disliked. But some scholars call it haram. And here's the important part. They don't call it haram because it intoxicates. They have another precedent by which it is considered haram. What do you guys think? What are all the studies show about tobacco and nicotine use or smoking? What does it lead to? Lung cancer. So they take the ayah in the Quran which says, do not kill yourself by your own hands, that it is self-destruction. Self-destruction. The same reason you would not take a whole bunch of pills that you know would end your life is the same reason you wouldn't slowly take a whole bunch of cigarettes that would eventually end your life, right? The statistics show, the medical reports show that, okay, this is something that destroys your lung. It causes tar in the lung. It causes X, X, Y, Z. So some scholars, by virtue of the ayah, do not kill yourself by your own hands, consider it haram. So the illah is actually different, that you do not essentially kill yourself. So killing the self is haram, therefore tobacco takes the ruling of haram. Other scholars say it is not as close to it is harmful, but we can't say it leads inevitably to death if one would take one puff of a cigarette, something like that, right? So they say they categorize it as lower as makruh, right? And it's arguable because you could get addicted and it's such. Yeah, so it's not an encouragement for people to do so, but it is the ruling they took, knowing that it's really harmful and you shouldn't regularly take this, and it's best if you completely stay away from it. And it's makruh, meaning it's disliked, which means maybe it's not sinful, but it's certainly blameworthy, meaning on the day of judgment, you'll find out if you were blamed for doing it. But we can't, according to those scholars, we can't, with full certainty, say that it is haram. And so they will label it as makruh. Okay, that's the second possible ruling. It is disliked because of the harm it causes. So whether it is considered killing yourself, it's haram. Whether it's considered very harmful, it's considered makruh. Right? And under that category of makruh, we talked about this, a similar example, a diabetic patient having sugar. Right? A diabetic patient having sugar would be very harmful to them. Could someone actually say this is haram for you? Like if you eat that chai with sugar, you're committing haram. We'd be hard pressed to be like, yeah, we can for sure say on, talking on Allah and His Messenger's behalf, this is haram for you. Some may even say it. Some may be like, yeah, if you do that, you're killing yourself, right? But for the majority of people, they will say this is makruh. Like you might be blameworthy if you just keep taking sugar every day and you know you're diabetic and it's killing yourself, then this is very harmful. So you could put it to the level of makruh tahrimi, like makruh that's almost haram. But could you really tell a person you're committing sin by having that sugar? It's hard to say. And so people categorize cigarettes in that same way. They're like, it's hard to say that taking that puff is absolutely haram, but we will very strongly discourage it. And then others will go to the point of making it impermissible. The reason we take this example is just to show that not everything that's haram and that we put in a category means it actually falls under haram because of the same reason. Alcohol and smoking are considered haram. Alcohol absolutely haram, and smoking, a percentage of scholars consider it haram for different illas, for different factors. They have different X factors. And if you speak on them like you without knowledge, then a trained person will immediately say, what are you doing? You're making analogy between two things that are not analogous. Immediately, the person who smokes tobacco will say, alcohol and smoking are not the same. One's a stimulant. And you'll be like, I, something that's wrong about both of them, but yeah, okay, I don't know, right? So you got to know the reason behind which something is considered haram. All right, so THC is considered haram. CBD not. Hemp, all those categories that are outside of the THC chemical are considered permissible because they do not have the X factor or the illa of iskar, except for THC. Or if you were to take the marijuana plant as a whole, you would have THC in it, therefore that would be impermissible. But if it was separated, the scholars allow the use of CBD. Right? This is a ruling made in the I believe it was like 2007 or something like that, or sometime in I guess maybe a little bit later. Uh, I'll give you guys one thing I'll do is after the class, I'm going to send you guys all the articles. Okay. So the ruling is it's allowed to utilize CBD. By default, THC is not permissible unless out of necessity determined by a health professional. Your doctor says, for example, nothing else seems to be working. We're going to utilize this medicine that has THC, right? This is the case, in some cases where the medicines given have so many terrible side effects and it's going to affect this or that. Someone has some illness, and they say really the one that will not cause as much side effects and has similar beneficial effects of numbing and things like that may be the THC. So this is not the recreational use of THC. This is the necessary use of THC determined by a medical professional. And a person who is given that, we talk about it from a Texas point of view. There is a whole Texas registry where THC medical cannabis is permissible, and you get yourself on the registry And it's a pretty rigid, stringent registry whereby you have to give your medical reports to prove that you have X, Y, and Z. So they have only a set of illnesses where they will permit the medical use of cannabis. It's not just anybody and everybody. They'll say things like, you know, this type of cancer or this type of illness or this type of illness, and they'll permit it. So, you know, you would say the medical doctors are sort of on, in some ways, you know, agree. The Islamic scholarship is agreeing with the medical doctors, at least here in Texas. We're not saying the rest of the U.S. Talking about the doctors in Texas who um, decide certain illnesses require certain measures, and THC they would permit in that case. Now, if Texas becomes I don't know what it's called, free state, that's not the word, but where it becomes fully accessible recreationally, we as Muslims still have our boundaries, and we say, well, we still have our boundaries that it is only for medical necessity, regardless if the medical professionals here change their minds. All right. So I think this is an interesting conversation because the conversation on marijuana has been debated for a long time, even in the Muslim world, been debated. Some arguing it's a stimulant, some arguing no, it's an intoxicant, and then everyone's saying, how do you know? How do you know? Just kidding. That's the conversation I've heard definitely. Like, how do you know?
What about theoretical substances that have both connotations being a state and that being an intoxicant? But let's say only if one is significantly outweighs the other and hypothetical, but or not as hypothetical. But let's
Is
say
there one you're thinking of?
I'm thinking, and I haven't read too much about them, but maybe psychedelics, for example, these are currently very popular these days. And
Psychedelics.
that's just cool.
Yeah, you know, the ruling of intoxicants is what little of it what a lot of it would intoxicate, a little bit of it is haram. So say a psychedelic, like say mushrooms, right? Mushrooms, someone can argue this particular mushroom, if you take if you smoke one joint, right, it would not get you intoxicated. But if you were to smoke like two or three, you would definitely get intoxicated. The ruling in terms of alcohol is what a lot of it would intoxicate, even one puff, one sip is haram. So someone can make the argument like, oh, my alcohol intoxication level is super high. Like, you know, I can drink 10 beers and I won't get intoxicated. Doesn't matter. The fact that 10 beers will intoxicate you means one sip is haram. The fact that three joints, I don't know how you do mushrooms. I don't know if you eat them or whatever. I'm just pretending like I know. I work with the youth, the youth, and I once was one. So if a lot of it intoxicates, a little bit of it is haram. If a lot of it intoxicates, a little bit is haram. So that argument does not typically work. Psychedelics, I would say, probably without even having to look it up, safely say not allowed. Yeah. There are medications that do similar things, right? There's going to be medications where the doctors will say, hey, you know, this is going to make you wonky. This is going to make you out of it for like 12 hours. This is not going to allow you to operate machinery. All of those have some element of intoxication, but you're taking them because the doctor said you must, right? And you can always ask for an alternative. So that it means that it's not just alcohol and THC doing this that's clouding the judgment. There's lots of things that are going to cloud your judgment. And if a doctor is mentioning that that's going to take place and you have an alternative, ask for the alternative. And if there's none, you take it. So in many cases, lots of people who've been in hospitals, been in, you know, different settings where they've been administered medication, it's likely you've been high. It's likely you've been intoxicated. And that was permitted because it was a medical necessity. Where it's not permitted is for recreational use, right? Because it makes people make wrong decisions, do things that they regret, cause harm to themselves or others. And the preservation of the mind and its stability is one of the 5 maqasid al-sharia. So we don't want to recreationally or voluntarily get into that state. If we must, we let a medical professional make that decision for us. All right, bismillah. Triple talaq. Triple talaq. Did you guys talk about it in the family law class?
Yes.
All right. So we skip it. Or you guys tell me a little bit about it. What are your thoughts on triple talaq? Or what do you remember? So we just quickly review it.
Like, if you say it like 3 times in like one sitting, it still counts as 3 persons.
Okay.
So is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, I was going to mention the difference of opinion. I was going to mention it from a perspective of contemporary fiqh, only simply because it didn't exist at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It was a new issue that began during the time of the Khulafa, and Umar radiallahu anhu had to deal with it. He's like, these people just triple talaqing. Like, what are we going to do about this? Like, stop playing with the sunnah of Allah. And so Umar radiallahu anhu said, look, if you say it 3 times, I'm counting it as 3. Right? Whereas other scholars differed and said 3 is like 1 because it's all in one sitting. And the whole point of talaq is to say talaq, to think about it. You have 3 months to think about it and take the wife back. And so saying it all in one go actually eliminates the whole sunnah or the process of Allah in this thought out, reflective type of talaq. So the scholars differ in their opinions. Umar radiallahu anhu said 3 means 3. Later scholars came and took a different opinion and issued different fatwa saying whatever is done in one sitting is like one talaq. No matter how many times you said it. You said it 15 times in one set of 5 minutes. It's just because you're super angry, but it's one talaq. And let's go through the sunnah and the process. And so this was strongly argued specifically in India. I remember the Indian courts just, within the last, sometime in the last decades, I saw it was making headlines as the Indian courts, the Indian Muslim courts were deciding, is triple talaq 1 or is it 3? And the reason being because just knowing a little bit about that society, it is breadwinner husbands, wives with no jobs in many cases, not in all cases, but in the villages, for example, wives with no access to any income. In one moment, they have no home. Because triple talaq means like you're gone, you're out, you don't even stay in my home anymore. And they were homeless on the streets, and they're like, can they take their kids? Can they not? And it was a really big difficulty for them. And then this new practice, as a result of this triple talaq, started coming out, tahlili marriage, which means the ruling is if a man has divorced his wife thrice and he wants to remarry her, she must remarry another man, consummate that marriage, divorce that man, and then only can she come back to her brand new, her old husband, and like they start over, right? This was Allah's sunnah to stop people from continuously like being in this tug of war, like you're divorced and then he takes her back, and then you're divorced and then he takes her back, and then you're divorced and take her back constantly, right? So Allah says 3, that's it. And if you happen to want to marry this guy again, like you really think this is a good idea, first marry someone else and see if that's actually better for you. If the sunnah was to help people be like, try something else. This was not working. But then the new practice comes out is like, pay me $1,000, I'll marry you, we'll consummate the marriage, I'll divorce you the next day, and you can go back to your husband. Tahlili marriage, which is obviously haram, right? It's a practice of marriage that has no intent of foreverness. It has no intent of provision, protection, all of these things that marriage has. So now this new practice came about in India, and now these women are going to these men, paying $1,000 to get back to their old husband, and probably the whole process starts all over again, right? And so the Indian court was trying to decide, do we outlaw 3 as 3 and just count it as 1? And make sure people take this slower process. Like you said 3, we're just counting it as 1, and you have 3 months to decide if you're going to take her back. I can't remember their final ruling, but I will say, and this is fine, like academically, it's okay to disagree. I respectfully disagree with the opinion that 3 is 3, and I consider that 3 is 1, thinking of the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and just taking that other opinion. I fully understand why someone would say 3 is 3, because it's like stop playing with Stop playing with the sunnah. But as a woman who has sat in, this back office with many other women who have had triple talaq done in one instant, I really lean on the other opinion that 3 is 1 because these women are distraught. They have nowhere to go. They're literally homeless, coming to this office saying, I don't know what to do. Took care of his children for 10 years. I never worked because I didn't have time. I couldn't use my degree. And now I have, I don't even have a home to stay in because a triple talaq in 5 seconds ends my complete relationship with this man. Is it really a triple talaq or can we work through it? And I will say, hey, these are the 2 opinions. Find a scholar. I'm just a student of knowledge. Okay, go to a scholar who takes the opinion that 3 is 1 and get it granted as 1. Get it granted as 1 and ask your husband to reconsider, 3 months to think whether he wants to still be with you or not. And even if he doesn't want to be with you and you don't want to be with this person, at least Allah has given you the God-given 3 months of your iddah to be in that home to be able to prepare your next move. And he provides for you in those 3 months. There is a wisdom in the whole process of divorce. Those 3 months gives the husband the time to decide whether he wants to reconcile. So if what he said was out of anger, he can reconsider. And the wife the time to decide, how am I going to live after these 3 months, especially if I've not been the breadwinner? What's my next move? I need to get a job. I need to get a new home, or I need to go to my parents' home, or whatever it may be. There's wisdom in the whole process, and triple talaq just throws all of that out the window. Yes.
Get married to someone, what if they have like million in property? Like, do you decide that before it? Or like,
Typically people don't talk about, the question was, do you decide on your triple talaq stance before the marriage? Typically people don't even know about triple talaq or something they want to discuss. It typically happens as a reaction to it taking place. I would say it's great to talk about it before, but like also in the moment, does anyone care? Someone's like, okay, I'll consider that, you can just do one at a time. But if someone's really angry, they'll just be like, no, I take the other opinion. I believe it's the Hanbali opinion that 3 is 3. So that's where you have to get a judge to come in between, and the judge decides, did you intend 1? Did you intend all 3? What did you intend? Right? Asking the man. In many cases, as I'm sitting in the office, men say 1 and they say, I didn't intend it at all. Right? That happens a lot. But that doesn't matter. Islam is like, yeah, you said it. So it's said. Unless you were majnoon or intoxicated, you said it. And so you can't play around with this word, and it's been said, right? It's 1 strike, right? 3 and you're out. So it'd be great to talk about it beforehand, but I don't think it holds any weight when someone's upset. But yeah, I'm just sharing my thoughts. I would lean towards 3 means 1, taking that opinion. It is a valid scholarly opinion, and that is just, for me, it is considering rahmah for everyone involved. It's merciful for the wife, it's merciful for those kids, it's even merciful to that husband who may be like, you know what, I didn't mean 3. I would like to reconcile. It just gives him the time to think if he wants to or not. Okay, adoption. All right, well, let's debate it for a little bit. Even online students, you guys are welcome to put it in the chat or open your mic. Is adoption allowed for Muslims? Adopting a child, bringing them to your home, the whole process, they take your name. What do you guys think?
it is not, but there's probably some parameters like when taking compensation, things like that.
Okay. So Bilqis is saying she thinks it's allowed, but there's probably some parameters, some rulings that have to be followed, like compensation. Okay. Like the amount of money to take care of that child.
Yeah.
Good.
I think it would be about, however, adopting the child, just my understanding is that that's not your biological child. So that may be for things like inheritance or for things like who, they can marry. And so whether or not they can take the name, I think that's one of the societal question. What is someone's last name? If someone's last name is directly attributed to who their biological parents are, I think, which was the case in Europe society, then you can claim someone to be your biological son if they're not your actual biological son. I think there's an open question as to whether or not that's the case in our society.
Okay, excellent. So, Taha's thought process is it is allowed, but you cannot attribute that child to you biologically. And the question of taking the last name, it differs perhaps in different societies where you are named Safiya bint Naim, which would have been my name in an Arab society, or in this case, Safiya Rabbit, which is a family tribal name. So there perhaps is difference of opinion, but the main thing you're mentioning is in terms of biological attribution of the child, of the adopted child to these non-biological parents would not be technically allowed, and inheritance laws would be different, and marriage laws would be different. Good. So let's just move on. We got it. You got them all. We'll go quickly through this. This is why I said it'll go fast when there's not a lot of students because, mashallah, everyone just comes to the conclusions of the scholars. Some way or another, we get to those. Anyone online, you're also welcome to share. Just go ahead and raise your hand and you can let me know when you want to share. All right, so Muslims' attitude towards adoption is the issue we are discussing. Alhamdulillah, you guys are all young folks, good opinions. If it was a group of people 50s to 70s in this room, even American Muslims 50s to 70s, and you asked how many people think adoption is permissible, you would just get a couple of hands. The majority of the older generation's perspective is that no, it's not allowed. Like we have the direct ayat in the Quran where Allah tells us that tabanni, the word for adoption, is not allowed. Tabanni coming from ibn, to like connect a person as your ibn, as your child, right? To take them as your child. Tabanni was outlawed in the Quran, right? And so for good reason are they not raising their hands? They're like, why would I say adoption's okay? It's like literally in the Quran. You can't do tabanni. Okay, so there's Muslim attitudes towards adoption, which is overwhelmingly negative. Well, we can't do that. Or how could one do that when it's been outlawed by Islam? The two is maybe someone says, okay, we could possibly do it, but it would be a non-mahram in the home. Like, how am I going to do that? A husband and wife adopt a boy. The boy can hang out with that dad, but like, how can he hang out with that mom who's not his mom? Right? Or you get, adopt two girls into a home. They can hang out with that lady all they want, but once they hit puberty, have to hijab up in front of that man. Like, how difficult is that situation? Or any of their children, right? You bring a 13-year-old son into a home with 12-year-old daughters. Wouldn't that cause lots of complications, right? That's not their biological brother. Humans are humans, hormones are hormones. So there's lots of things to consider. And so we can say there are reasons that people who say it's not allowed, they have some good points, right? The mahram issue can cause a lot of difficulty. Okay, and then finally, another issue is that there are actually many Muslim children in foster care or in the adoption system who cannot find adoptive or fostering Muslim families simply because of the taboo behind even the word adoption and fostering, that many Muslim kids are being put into non-Muslim homes. We're talking about here in the US, here in Houston itself, and then we're talking about all over the Muslim world. People are adopting in the Muslim countries who allow them to adopt out, people are adopting Muslim kids into non-Muslim homes and raising them as non-Muslims, right? But if we're going to talk about the local issue, the same thing is happening here. How many times, it's not often, but you get that message once a year, family lost the parents or parents are incarcerated, 3 Muslim kids, who's going to take care of them? And then the WhatsApp message goes from family to family to family. And we realize none of us are foster or adopt certified. Like, our community is not prepared for this. Nobody is ready for it. Nobody's gone through the 6 months process to get certified. And so now what do we do? Those poor, 3 kids are just going to be put into a home where they are introduced to so many things that are not a part of their Islamic practice and naturally start losing it, right? An older child maybe not so much, but a kid 6 to 7, those foundations will quickly wither away. So we as a community, because of the taboo and our attitude towards adoption, even if it's not that it's not haram, we're not actively seeking certification. Therefore, we are not prepared when these children go into the system. I worked closely with Sarah Haider Alam, who was a part of Cultivating Families, and her objective, she adopted 2 children. Her objective was to go to the masajid to tell the Muslim community how important it is just to get certified. It's like maybe you're not going to ever foster or adopt in your life, but just go through the process in case we ever need it. Because imagine what other option these kids have. They don't have much other option. Okay, so there is a need for it in our community, and then there is a pushback against it within our community. And then there are some simple solutions. All right. So in Surah Al-Ahzab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah does not regard, okay, here, this is the more important ayah. He does not regard your adopted children as your real children. These are your baseless assertions. Okay? That's here. وَمَا جَعَلَ أَدْعِيَاءَكُمْ أَبْنَاءَكُمْ. He does not make those who you call your children your actual children. Okay? So what was happening was this process of tabanni. Somebody loved a child so much. Typically, where that took place was it was a slave living within their home, right? A slave or a servant living within their home who did not have parents, or they were children in slavery, and so they don't know who the parents are. And so people would say, I love this child so much, I don't want to, they're no longer a slave in my home, I am freeing them and they are my child. Okay, and that took place with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with Zayd ibn Haritha. Zayd ibn Haritha is a slave of Khadija radiallahu anha, and she gifts Zayd ibn Haritha to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with such a soft heart, loves Zayd ibn Haritha like a son, and so therefore he frees Zayd ibn Haritha and says to the people publicly, "This is Zayd ibn Muhammad from now on. This is Zayd, the son of Muhammad." Right? And it doesn't take place just there. It takes place with another example is Abu Hudayfa and oh gosh, what's his wife's name? Abu Hudayfa and his wife, I guess Hudayfa, and their servant Salim. So Salim, Mawla Abu Hudayfa, is a young boy, grows up in their home. He loves him so much, and he adopts him. Okay, Salim is like my son, right? So Abu Hudayfa he's one who converted to Islam. So he's living in Mecca. He's got this, he and his wife, he's got this little boy Salim. Salim eventually grows into a young man. It's like a 12, 13-year-old man. And now his wife says, well, what do we do now? Because technically he's not actually our child. And she says to she says to the Prophet ﷺ, I see something in my husband's eyes. Like you can see there's hesitancy here. Like this boy has grown to a man, and now we feel like, what do we do? We love him like a child. We've raised him like a child, but he's actually a non-mahram to me, right? And so we'll talk about what the Prophet ﷺ said in a moment. But let's talk about adoption. Okay. So here is the ruling for adoption. A person is not allowed to take an orphan and give them his or her last name, a share to his inheritance similar to their own children. What is permitted is sponsorship, kafala. Prophet ﷺ said, I and the one who sponsors the orphan are like this in Jannah, right? Like we're that close, or something like this, like we're intertwined, like you are so close to me if you are someone who takes care of the orphan. So there was no issue with taking care of taking in an orphan. The issue came with a tabanni, attributing a person to you, to your lineage, erasing their previous lineage and attributing them to you, making them your ibn. So a person may sponsor a child, host them in their home, care for them as they would care for their own children, except for in legal matters. For example, the adopted children keep their own last names, keep their lineage. They are allowed to marry the children of their adopted parents. So you recognize that those children in your home are actually non-mahram to one another. Can't just say, hey, you're like brothers and sisters, so you can uncover. No, still keep the legal rulings. Adopted and biological children of the opposite sex should still dress modestly in front of each other. The adopted children do not have a share in the estate of their adopted parents, so they do not take inheritance, but they can get a share of the inheritance up to 1/3 through a wasiya, bequest. Okay, so what does that mean? A man passes away and he has $100,000 left to be distributed. He's got 2 sons, a daughter, a wife, father, and then he's got this child that he took care of in his home, an orphan that he took care of in his home. Assalamu alaikum. Not by tabanni, we'll say not by adoption, but pretty much like he adopted him like he was a child. Islamically, the Prophet ﷺ Islam permits that before your inheritance is distributed, if you made a will, you can make a will that says up to 1/3 is given to someone who is not an heir at all. Up to 1/3 of all of your wealth can be given to someone who is not an heir. This amount can't be given to an heir because the heirs are distributed exactly as they ought to be distributed, right? For the son is half, and for the wife is a sixth, and I'm like slightly trying to remember and making up numbers at the same time. For daughters and sons, the son gets double the daughter, but a bunch of daughters gets 2/3. All of these numbers, right? Exact numbers are given. It's a mathematical equation when it comes to inheritance. But before that distribution is done, up to 1/3 can be given to anybody who's not an heir. Okay, so you've got like a favorite cousin, and a cousin is typically not an heir because they're too far removed, right? You got this favorite cousin, you're like, man, that cousin, he did me a solid throughout my whole life. I'm giving 1/3 of my wealth to him, or a sixth or a fifth, but up to 1/3 you can give it away. And then the rest of the 2/3 gets distributed to the heirs. And so there is a possibility to give to the adopted child an amount that is still, within the realm of what may have been given to, or similar to what may have been given to another child, but as a bequest, as a wasiya. Okay, so the wasiya is given first. First, the debts are paid off, then the wasiya is given, and then the rest of the money is given as inheritance. So there is still an element of being able to take care of this child after one's death through inheritance, but not distributed heir inheritance, but a wasiya, a bequest. Okay. And here is the direct hadith, the direct ayah. Surah Al-Ahzab, ayah 5. And let your adopted children keep their family names. That is more just in the sight of Allah. But if you do not know their fathers, then they are simply your fellow believers and close associates. There's no blame for you for what you do by mistake, but only for what you do intentionally, and Allah is all forgiving, most merciful. This was Allah forgiving all of those who had done adoption. It's like reverse it. Go back, reverse their names from your names to their parents, to their actual parents' names, if you know them. And if you don't, one of the rulings is you just name that person Ibn Abdullah, like son of the slave of Allah, son or daughter of the slave of Allah, because you don't know their parents' names. Whatever it may be, do not attribute it to your own name. Okay, and Allah will forgive those who did it mistakenly. So the well-known adoptees, first we mentioned, was Zayd ibn Haritha. Prophet ﷺ loved and cared for Zayd ibn Haritha. And it says statement of Aisha, and I can't recall that statement at the moment. Whoops, sorry. And then there is Salim, the Mawla of Abu Hudayfa, we talked about, the child who grew up in the home of Abu Hudayfa, and then he became a teenager, and they thought, oh, this is a little strange. I'll be completely honest here, I didn't make this slide, so I don't know all of these stories. But I will tell you the story of Salim. very briefly because it's coming up in the milk bank conversation. So the story of Salim is, as I mentioned earlier, Abu Hudhaifa and his wife Hudhaifa have Salim, who is their servant or slave from a young age. They love him like a son, adopt him like a son. Then the rulings of do not give them your names comes about. So they're like, well, he's not really our son, but he's like a son to us. He hits puberty, and now there's a little bit of an awkwardness because he's not mahram to the wife. And so the wife comes to the Prophet ﷺ and explains the whole situation, and the Prophet ﷺ says, give him your milk, he will be your son. Give him your milk, and he will be like your son. Milk kinship exists, right? A woman gives a child, a baby, milk, and now this is mother and child, milk mother and child. They are mahram to one another. Do not inherit, but they are mahram to one another. So this is a sort of a strange case because Salim's like a grown kid, a post-pubescent adolescent, right? And so the Islamic understanding or the sharh is that she is a woman who had milk, and therefore maybe she had other children, so she had milk. She extracted milk and gave it to him in a cup, something like that, right? We're not talking about doing anything that would be outside of the Sharia. And so even the scholars mention from this that milk given in any way is permitted to create milk kinship, according to some scholars. It doesn't have to be nursed, right? It can be simply a cup of milk. They even said it can be made in a cheese. Make that milk into a cheese and feed it to that child. And why? Why did they all accept this? Because of the case of Salim. They said, clearly in the case of Salim, who was an adolescent, milk was extracted and given to him, probably in a cup. Therefore, milk given that is not nursed can still be considered kinship in special necessary cases like the case of Salim. And so the scholars differ, and that we'll talk about that in the milk bank conversation. The scholars differ in their rulings on the minimum amount. So some say 1 sip creates milk kinship, and others say 5 full feedings, and others say 3 full feedings. And the reality is we don't know what happened in Salim's case. Prophet ﷺ said, just give him milk and he will be like your son. So maybe she went and gave 5 full feedings, 5 full cups of milk over the course of 5 days. Maybe she gave him 1 sip, Allahu A'lam. But there are rulings that mention a minimum amount. There are also rulings that mention it must be done nursed, right? And that it must be done by a child who is under 2. Salim's is an interesting special case and has been debated for centuries. I guess people are not really debating it that much. Nobody's talking about it much. But even at the time of the Prophet, even at the time after the Prophet's death, Aisha radiallahu anha debated it. When she wanted, I talked to you about this, when she wanted her grown male cousins to visit her, she would ask a sister of hers, give him your milk. I want to meet with my cousin. So he can become like a brother to me. And the other wives of the Prophet ﷺ strongly disagreed, and they're like, no, you can't use this ruling this way. They strongly disagreed with her. But Aisha and Hafsa, 2 of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, this is after his death, so they can't get confirmation from him. But they were like, no, we had the case of Salim. Salim was a grown boy, and it was a necessary case. She's like, I necessarily need to and want to see my cousin. Give him some milk. Right? Extract some milk, give him some milk, and let him enter. And this was why, because the wives of the Prophet ﷺ had special rules that after his death, they were not to marry anyone after the Prophet ﷺ's death, and that if they were to be seen, they were seen min wara'i hijabin, they were seen from behind a curtain. Right? So typically, they were in their homes and behind a curtain, except for women, so they would open the curtain, or except for male relatives that were her mahram, they would see them. There was a non-related man, she would put up the curtain and they would ask their questions. I mean, Aisha radiallahu anha was a scholar in her own right, so people would come from all over to ask questions, but she would draw the curtain. They would ask from min wara'i hijab. So she wanted to see her cousin. She'd say, give him some milk. Open the curtain. We're like brother and sister now. Highly debated. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, one of the scholars that the Hanbali madhab takes from, and you would say some will say he's the scholar that the Salafi movement takes from a lot. The majority opinion is no, none of this is allowed. Salam was a very specific case, and we're going to say it's an anomaly, and we're not going to take it as the general ruling. Milk kinship only occurs under 2 years, 5 feedings, etc. All of the general rulings we know. And Ibn Taymiyyah said, since Aisha radiallahu anha held this opinion, he's like, who are we to say it's wrong? But it would be special cases like Satin. A family comes to have a new family member in their home who happens, or they comes to their family is another child who happens to be over 2 years old, and this family has other children, or they can't create the milk kinship because that child is over 2. Let's make things easier and create a mahram relationship by her giving milk, or her sister giving milk, or someone from some female relative giving milk to this child to make it a more safe environment for everyone here. Okay, you're like brothers and sisters now. You're like mother, father, and child now. So Ibn Taymiyyah said in cases like the case of Salim, then this would be permitted even after the age of 2, even by 1 sip. Right? And so a famous case came about in Egypt sometime in the last decade. It made news headlines. You guys can look it up yourself. A woman was working in her office, and she had to be on she had a team member who was male that she had to work closely with. And she's like, well, this feels uncomfortable. Here's my milk. She gave him his milk, and she said, now we are brother and sister, so we can work easily together. And it became a very, went on the headlines. And she's like, but the ruling of Salim, Aisha radiallahu anha's opinion, Ibn Taymiyyah, right? Using all of those rulings to say, like, I have the right to ask him, and he accepted, and now we are like milk brother and sister. And there's a whole, like, the Al Azhar or Sharif, and they're getting into it, and like, what is this ruling? We need to put some boundaries around this ruling instead of just saying, it's open and allowed. And I'll be honest, I don't remember what the Azhari's final opinion on it was, but I'm pretty sure they said, no, the way she utilized it was not as it ought to be utilized. And let's limit it to cases that are similar to Saad, right? A child in your home.
Like that child got milk from this lady.
It should be known, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't have to be announced to the world like a nikah needs to be announced, but it should be known within the family. Because then nobody can marry that child. He's like mahram to that woman. So nobody who is related to that woman, like her daughters, could not marry that child. Right? So it should be known within the family. It shouldn't be like these kept secrets and things like this. In fact, my teacher, one of my teachers, Dr. Luqman Zakaria, Nigerian teacher, studied in Medina. He was teaching us in Malaysia. He was our fiqh teacher. He said one day, a man and a woman who were married came in front of this elderly woman, and they shared that they were married, and she said, I gave milk to both of you. Haram, you're not married. You can't be married. Imagine, like, that is a problem if it's not announced, if it's not recorded. I don't remember what happened to them. Maybe they had to part, and that would be very sad. But this woman knew. She was a wet nurse, and she's like, I milked you and I milked you. You're not allowed to marry one another, because now they are mahram to one another as milk brother and sister. So it is very important to keep a record of this, because imagine how much that destroyed their life. Allah knows best. That's a difficult test for them. But yeah, it's very important that it be recorded and known. Which is why there's this strong argument against milk banks in the Muslim world, is like, get milk from random people. Are you really paying attention? Like, if you are a person who got milk from 7, 8 different women because of a milk bank, you have to do a lot of cross-reference and work before you marry that woman who also had milk from 7, 8 different women. Okay, who are these women? Who are their children? You have to have a whole family tree of these women who gave you milk to make sure I'm not marrying any of their sisters, aunts, mothers, or daughters. It's a lot of people. That's a big tree you have to stay away from.
Ancestry for milk banks.
Yes, I think that's what they would need is they would need a full ancestral family tree kept in order for these milk banks to be plausible, which is why everyone rejected Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi when he suggested it. They were like, it's just why do we need to make a difficulty on us that we just don't need to do? We have enough wet nurses and they do their work good, and it's not like it's a system that's already working, right? So let's not add difficulty to this.
Child, instead of giving them 8 different adults.
So that's how it works in the Muslim world. And we're actually on a completely different topic here, but the way it typically works in the Muslim world is there are still wet nurses. So if a child in the hospital needs milk, I'm sure there's they call the wet nurse, just like you call the midwife or you call these other alternative, you know, people that you can go to that help with different certain things. I'm sure there's the hotline of the wet nurses you can call that the hospital knows. So this is a known wet nurse. She comes, she takes care of the children in the hospital, just like make sure you know who she is and you have her name and you know her family tree. It's a lot to keep track of. Okay. Adoption. What about calling someone an endearing name commonly used for blood relations? Yajuz, permissible. Anas ibn Malik, who was given from a young age as a servant in the Prophet ﷺ's home. He wasn't a slave. Simply his mother, just a very brilliant woman, Sulaim, she was like, I want my son to learn everything about this man, Muhammad ﷺ, our leader. So she said, I am giving my son to you to serve you. So essentially that's like his apprenticeship, his learning is just living in the home of the Prophet ﷺ. Anas ibn Malik was called by the Prophet ﷺ as Ya Bunayya, which is not just like Ibni, my son. It's like, oh, my dear beloved son. So then the question comes, if you were to adopt a child, can you call them your son? In an endearing way? Yes. As the Prophet ﷺ called a servant in his home, my son. People do that all the time. I call my nieces my girl. Hey, my girls, oh, my girl. They're not my girl. They're my niece. But in an endearing way, I can call them my daughter or my girl. I call my boy, my son, my boy, so I call them my girl. This is what I do. So it's permitted, though they may not be, and because it is a known practice, cultural practice. This is just another example. The Prophet ﷺ is calling another young man my son. Qala bunayya, same word. He called another young man his son. So are you allowed to call them endearing words and names? Yes. All right. And so here are the final rulings. Adoption, or the concept of a tabanni, it has the word ibn in there. Okay. Calling a person your actual child by lineage, not permitted. And it erases genealogy, not permitted. But fostering or adopting and caring for an orphan is highly encouraged, kafala, so long as genealogy is maintained and rules of mahram kinship are maintained and inheritance is understood, right? Finally, we already spoke about this. A non-mahram living in the household would lead to hijab, modesty, and feeling restricted in your own home. And therefore, we talked about some of the solutions. Milk kinship through nursing the child under 2 years. Great. Okay.
In case like a American, let's say a Muslim family want to get Islam, but they have a kid that they foster.
Okay.
What if that case like you should do?
Okay, so a non-Muslim family wants to become a Muslim family, but they have a foster or adopted child.
Yeah,
Okay. They can teach that child Islam, but the child makes the decision for themselves. It would be the same if a most Muslim family adopted a non-Muslim child. There's no compulsion in religion, but you lead by example and you model good behavior. Yeah. Um, you lead by example and you model good behavior. You invite them to Islam and you encourage them to it, you take them to the masjid, but you cannot force a person. Different than your own child who you can say, pray, fast, right? Because that is a father-child relationship. Someone that you are taking care of, you say, I encourage you to pray. I encourage you to fast. Allahu Akbar. Yeah, not I have an aunt who fostered a non-Muslim child. The child was very young, still an infant, so you know it would be different, but they practiced Islam just as they would. And eventually, if that child learned Islam and took it on as their faith, great. Yeah. However, in the adoption system, they do ask you to maintain a child's previous practice. So if a child regularly went to church every Sunday, so they ask you to continue that, right? Or they ask you if the child wishes to do that, that you continue some sort of practice within their faith. So it gets a little like complex and complicated when you're adopting older children.
They want to, then they can do the belt thing.
Yes, so if a child wanted to, so let's give an example. A Muslim family adopts a 10-year-old Muslim boy, 10-year-old Christian boy. He learns about Islam over time. He decides he wants to become a Muslim. He becomes a Muslim at age 11, 12. He accepts Islam. And now this is a 12-year-old boy in their home who is not mahram to the mother, right? And so they could, according to Ibn Taymiyyah, take the ruling of Salim and say, you've got a child in your home, may as well just give that child milk. How can she induce milk if she's not had a child? She could take lactation pills, or another female direct relative could give, who is already breastfeeding, could give some milk to that child, and then it still creates a connection of milk kinship. But just between that woman and the child, not between her children. It has to be her milk for it to create a relationship between her children.
Good.
You're welcome. Yeah, there are solutions. If the child's last name is different than their father's name for legal purposes, they have to legally change to their father's. Okay, to keep the name since they don't deny who their father is. There's actually a difference of opinion on the changing of names, and this has to do with urf, custom, right? So if the custom of a place is to change the child's last name, you don't have to. I don't think in American policy you have to change the child's last name. So let's just say that, you know, up front is the child can keep their last name. You don't have to. And so it seems in line with Islamic legal ruling, you would keep their last name. Now, if they become known as, like, let's give an example. Your last name, Taha?
Sure.
This is a family name. Okay, so your father's first name is something else. Okay, Najah. Okay, so Taha would have been Taha ibn Najah al-Sharafi, right? Right. Al-Sharafi is like a family tribal name. So maybe if Taha's family was to adopt William, right? William and his last name is Richard. William Richards. And William Richards is like, you know, but like really like being known as the Al-Sharafi family. Possibly, according to urf and custom, Islamic law would allow him to be William Richard al-Sharafi because that is a tribal name and it doesn't show direct lineage. Because sometimes tribal names had to do with where you're from or what you did as an occupation, right? And doesn't necessarily have to do with a name lineage. right? Al-Bukhari, for example, is that's not his name. That is his tribal name. They are from the area of Bukhara in Persia, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan. I should know this. Somewhere over there. Someone would know better than me. A historian. But Al-Bukhari is just a title, right? It's a title. His name was Nu'man ibn Malik. I shouldn't speak on things I don't know. Nu'man. Um, so yeah, it's possible that you may be given like a family name, so long as that family name is not a lineage related name, but maybe just like a title given to a family. Like the last name Siddiqui, for example, or a name like it means, oh, you come, you're from the people who come from Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Oh, I guess that is more lineage related. True. Yeah. But there are people who I don't know the word, but like in Urdu, it's like something wala, which means like somebody who did this occupation, right? So it's more connected to like what's a trait of this family rather than the name in terms of lineage.
Names. And it may actually denote like, you have a family history of
Blacksmith, yeah. So Smith. But then, over time, Smith now is actually a proper last name, and now so the best thing is just have the child maintain the name they were given at birth, right? Have the child maintain. There's no real reason to change it. People say, oh, but like when you're traveling, it's really difficult. Not true at all. I have a different last name than my son. My son has a different last name than his father. Like we all have different last names because in Muslim cultures we do all sorts of things, right? All me, my son, his father, all have different last names. No one's ever had issue. Said, who is this child? Who is married to? It's like, okay, so so it's not as tough as people say it would be. If you've got birth certificates, then everything's okay. Okay, this is just mentioning that your foster mothers and your foster sisters become your mahram. They become your mahram. Change it or can they keep it? Okay, so the question is, if they have a different family member's name, not their father's name, would they be required to change it or can they keep it? Oh, this is a good question. It is important that lineage is kept. However, in our societies, we don't do that. My name is not Safiya bint Na'im. But if you were to ask me, I know that I am Safiya, the daughter of Na'im, the daughter of Yusuf, the daughter of da 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 da, right? That is where we can maintain lineage if it hasn't been maintained in proper documentation. That's important to know. As Taha is the son of Najah. Najah?
Najah.
Najah. He is the son of Najah. He knows that. And so if someone was to ask, he'd say, I'm Taha, the son of Najah, the son of da 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 da. That is important. If you are making decisions for the next generation, it's good to make decisions for the next generation based on what you know is Islamically correct. But what's been done is done. What's been done is done, We don't change that as long as we know the genealogy and it's not been erased, right? Make your little family tree, go to 23andMe, whatever. I don't know what I don't think that website makes family trees, but go make that family tree, know who is the son of who, know your family's history, at least know at least 2 generations, like your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, right? Know a little bit. I can't say I know great-grandfather's names on both sides, so speaking to myself before any of you, but at least you know your parents and your grandparents, hopefully, right? If that's not maintained legally, then that it is what it is. You don't need to go ahead and change that. As long as you know it yourself and you're able to share that with a person you are planning to marry, to make sure as you cross-reference that you are not siblings. Or not just siblings, like not considered aunt and nephew by virtue of some sort of relationship. Okay. Oh, okay. I guess I started talking about all of this without going to the slides, but does breastfeeding the child older than 2 create this kinship? So can you breastfeed a child or give milk to a child over 2? Does it create the milk kinship bond where you are mahram to one another? Already gave you guys the answers. Majority of scholars say no, it does not create this kinship because the ayah in the Quran that refers to breastfeeding being limited to 2 years. Hawlaini kamilayn, 2 full years. However, there were companions and scholars who believed giving milk beyond 2 years does create milk kinship, does create a mahram relationship, specifically championed by Aisha radiallahu anha. We talked about that. And then she was followed by the other wife of the Prophet ﷺ, Hafsa. And then the rest of these are some of the Sahaba, and then some of the uh, Tabi'een. Layth ibn Sa'ud, Layth ibn Sa'd is like a scholar in his own right from the Tabi'een who had like the 5th madhab, but his school died out. His students didn't continue his madhab. So he's like a pretty huge scholar. And he said, hey, this is okay. And then Dawood al-Zahiri, who is called the literalist, who said that yes, since we have the text that Salim was permitted to become mahram at this post-pubescent age, then the text allows it. Okay. But this is a very small minority opinion. Does not, it's in no way, if you were to share this out, out loud to anyone, they'd be like, what are you talking about? Never heard this opinion. It's a very minute minority opinion held by Aisha radiallahu anha primarily. And then Ibn Taymiyyah speaks about it. Here's the actual hadith about Salim and Abu Hudayfa, right? The wife of Salim comes and says, Salim has attained puberty as men attain. He understands what they understand, and he enters our house freely. I, however, perceive there is something in the heart of Abu Hudayfa, her husband. Whereupon Allah's apostle said to her, give him your milk, and you would become unlawful for him, which means you would become mahram to him. And that which Abu Hudayfa feels in his heart will disappear. She returned and said to our Suckleton, this is not good. This is terrible translation. She said, I did rada'a, which means like giving the milk from the breast. It doesn't mean that she sucked him. That was the majority opinion. She did not. Now, what was there in the heart of Abu Hudayfa disappeared. Okay, so that's terrible translation. I need to change that in the hadith, in the translation I put here. But this is a good example of how sometimes translation can really confuse you, because the word rada'a is the whole concept of milk kinship. Yes, connected to it is suckling, but doesn't have to be fully connected to it. It is the milk that creates the bond between a woman and a child. And since the scholars allowed it in the case of bottle feeding, right? You could extract milk and bottle feed, just like a woman could extract milk and bottle feed. That's still considered breast milk for that child. In the same way, a woman could extract and bottle feed or cup feed anybody else, and it would still be considered that same milk kinship, right? Allahu alam, there is an opinion that it has to be breastfed.
Question, I was to take separate card.
Yeah, we should take a break. Let's see. I'm done. This is the last slide. We'll take our break. All right. According to Ibn Taymiyyah, it is not allowed for the older child except in a case of necessity similar to Salim's. Yes, sorry. We've already talked about all this, and I just neglected to move the slides. Okay, so you'll find it all in your notes. Does breastfeeding the older child create the kinship? According to the majority, no. According to Ibn Taymiyyah, by way of Aisha radiallahu anha's opinion, championed by a couple of scholars, some of who are reputable, many of whom are reputable, but still a minority opinion. Yes, after 2, does not have to be suckled, and it has to be a special case of necessity, like Salim. You got a kid in your home. This is going to be a kid forever in your home, not a temporary thing, not like a cousin visiting for the summer. No, it's like this child is in your care now. And so let's take away the harm of this non-mahram relationship that it is causing some discomfort, and let's go ahead and make this a mahram relationship. Sheikh Yasser Qadi has, I mean, it was just a Facebook post, but nonetheless, to me, it has some merit. He once said in a Facebook post, he does not take the opinion that you can give milk to the older child, but he said that get over it. Take care of these children. Get over it. Wear your hijab. Isn't it more important to take care of these children that come into your care than for you to feel a little bit of discomfort? That's what he said. So I was like, yeah. You could even not take the opinion because it's a minority opinion. And you could say, I'm sticking with the majority, but I'm just going to get over it because these children need a home. Right? Be conscious, be wary, be careful of the non-mahram relationship. Don't bring a 12-year-old boy into a home with your 12-year-old daughter. Don't do things that are going to cause harm. But there is a child who needs a home. You have a home. You're able to take care of them. Your neighbors, are sick, passed away, incarcerated, and you've been a good neighbor to this child. Take him in. Find another home for him. But in that interim, that 1-2 years, take him in because if you're not, then who is going to? And yes, it's a little difficult. Wear your hijab, but who else is going to take this kid? So take care of them. Whether it's a relative, whether it's your neighbor, whether it's a kid sitting in the foster care system, prepare yourself to take care of them and do the difficult work. Not everyone has to, but if no one does, I think we as an entire community will be blameworthy. Right? It's not everybody's job, but if no one does it, we're going to be asked. We are going to be mas'ool on the day of judgment that there were these children. You had 10,000 Muslims in Houston. Not one of you was ready to take them in. Not one of you was ready to put on the hijab to take them in. Not one of you was ready to do the 6 months course to take them in. And I say this to myself before anyone else. I've been in those sessions so many times to start the process, never finished it. So to myself before anyone else. And then the moment that announcement comes, I'm like, I never finished the training. I never went through the full 6 months. Like, I am blameworthy here. Why didn't I? Because I'm not sure who else is going to take this kid in. With that, inshallah, we'll take our first 10-minute break. We'll be back at 11:11, inshallah. I hope more than anything, this just encourages you guys to consider foster and adopt, or at least consider to encourage someone to do such a thing. All right, we'll be back at milk banks. A lot of milk conversation today. It really is what they talked about in Motive.
I have no idea.
There was so much myth about milk.
Kind of that first part, right?
Oh my god. Yeah. So fun. Oh, you. Yeah, I was like listening to you on the way. Yes. I didn't want to.
Where are you from, Safa?
Muslim. Jordan.
تتكلمين باللغة العربية.
Yes.
All right, well, we got some snacks and coffee and tea in the back.
Oh. Funny. I think it's the switching. Whatever the switch was. Yeah. It's like combined. LEDs. Trying not to say. Actually, I got my new test results yesterday. It said that I had basically indicated that I had allergies. Here, this one, what the spring allergy? I think specify which time, but it just means there's a particular company explaining inside. What's the situation my body's fighting? Some things, most likely this allergies. Yeah, because I was okay. It's interesting. Then keep on going doing the test and see this. You're ready, because it's gonna help whatever you want. I think you can try. See if I start talking to What they're thinking of myself, like, what's this? Let's have the what's happening. He's a lot of but I do wonder, when it's this, first, or you can hold them, the strategy, this is. So, definitely, oh, that's me, see, absolutely. No, that makes sense. Your culture. That's different. If you have insurance, you have to use it. You're paying for like it's right, so before. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, IEP is much better. No, the allergies, like, I never had that, except for like the last two. It's good. It's good. And how long is it? No, how long is it? Let's see if I'm fine. Let's start questions. Yeah. I remember their first 2 degrees for degree. I used to take things. Like some of them, yeah. Like moving from rain to here. And doing it 6 months, like actually, like there's about, my first year. Yes. This is really the terrible ever experience. So interesting, yeah. It's kind of selfish, I think as your body can just, yeah, just use the germs and stuff. It's serious. Yeah. Serious. Yeah, we feel like a year and a half ago, and I'm like, yeah, it was like probably the most sick of like. Yes, yeah, then you will be like, okay, I prepare myself for that. Next year, I was like, oh, okay. They must. I always think that you're being more prepared to learn it, like. But like my other kids seem like completely differently when it's like. Well, also, I've been living this, and it's students' fault. Which is saying, like, I'm confident about this year, so sciences. So. Oh, so and it's getting worse. Yeah, I noticed that it's getting worse. Every single year, especially the allergies, yes. So like I love it. So. This is not the allergies looking for. Maybe the weather here is changing really. I mean, because when I was getting tested for children, like, because I'm feeling, sort of getting more very paranoid. Is it just me? Basically, because I hear it's very, very, yeah, yeah. It makes sense. Because I don't really like my conduction. I'm much like I can talk with a sneeze. Right? Yeah. Okay, that's so just be okay. What places have you gone to? You guys like I feel like Jordan. Like whenever you go back, like even the food, like whenever you eat, your stomach doesn't get every stomach thing. That's weird. Here, like from the air, you just like just breathe it. Like a real air, your stomach's good. And the guard hurting. Like stop. Yeah. I don't eat bread here. Me too. It's so bad. It's so bad. Yeah. Why? Like I get bloated or? Yeah, I'm bloated. Like everywhere else, I eat bread else. Oh, random. Yeah, yeah, like gluten here is so it's so interesting. It's so like whenever I eat, what is it, chickpeas? I used to eat chickpeas like fun in Jordan. If they're fit. Yeah, yeah. I didn't fly. I didn't have it. Yeah. Some processed or something. I don't know. In there. And everything here is not true. It's like it. Yeah, it's not. Like I actually like what's just weird with eating cookies because it also has like gluten. My mom got these cookies like from my children. Like, I was just, like, cause I was just munching, like, and then I was like, need something like a full thing. I ate all of that. Yeah, yeah. I started eating, cause I ran out of stock. And I started like eating, I guess, more cookies here. And, so, it was well, and they don't taste good as, yeah, they don't taste good. It's not interesting. Yeah, we would do some clean lists. Yeah. Because there's been like a lot of GI issues for like a lot of like. Yes, I know, you're in this, yeah, and you're starting to see a lot. You can get it of that. It's too much, even in the middle. Yeah, it's like. In the middle here is. It's close to like. Yeah, I don't drink it all. That's why I put out period. Keep it up, like, yeah, so, you know, I swear, I wish I could do that. I'm already, like, I think that's in how we say about it. But, yeah, I didn't, like, cause I traveled, I was like, oh, I'm fine. But then I came back here and I needed a guidance, get platforms. And it's from a very. So for us, I guess. But I'm just a lot of people were. Very things. I used to do that, like, 5 years ago. Like, I mean, like, it just sounds it. She'd be like, no bread, no rice, nothing. I wasn't my best era. But then I could, yeah. Okay, where like I had to go to Jordan, then I make that. So you cut that and then to there. Okay, it's not worth a good part for me. And then once your body's like, hey, you're not gonna do that again to me. Yeah, that's like, I'm at that point where my body's like, no, I know what you're gonna do. That's why it's kind of like same work. Everything. And you like whatever like you look how like your body has a memory. It's probably like everything.
All right, Bismillah. Okay, I think we'll finish early. I think so. We have two more prompts left, abortion and milk banks. And we kind of talked a lot about milk banks a lot. So we'll just go through the slides. But there's one I promised I see in my messages, which was plastic surgery. Right? So we'll just talk about it a little bit. I don't have slides on it, but I think it'll be a fun debate. Okay. Find like an empty slide. No empty slides. We'll just do it on this slide. All right. So what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to debate it out amongst yourselves. That's the online and the on-site students. So wait. I'm not sharing my slide. Okay. So on-site students, let's say two in the back and then two in the front. Okay, the two in the back, you guys are gonna argue for plastic surgery is not allowed at all. And Bilqis and Taha, you will argue that plastic surgery is allowed. Okay, so whatever arguments you'd like to come up with, right? You can even anticipate the other side's argument. So work together. You guys have like 3 minutes to discuss, and then you guys will debate it out. Online, let me know. Give me a 1 in the chat box if you guys would like to actually talk in the chat. Then I'll give you guys your prompt and you can debate it out. Between Danya, Hasna, Hira, Mawahib. Give me a 1 in the chat box, then I know you are ready to debate. And if nobody is, no problem. Nobody's responding. All right, you guys just want to. Yeah, Mawahib, you can argue those as well. Figure out what you want to say about them. Okay. Well, let me just do this. Whoever's online, I'll give you 2 to 3 minutes to think about your opinion. Is plastic surgery allowed or not? What are the Islamic rulings? What do you think is connected to it? And don't forget about these principles sitting here. All right, 3 minutes, go.
If they're close, it's your. Fine. If there's a, or you're missing what I.
Okay.
I can store that.
First of all, energy of connection is right.
Yeah.
That's about that's the key.
Cosmetic and kitchen.
Oh, what, not even, yeah, it is customized. So I just want. For example, say like it's upper. Or maybe they have a good TV and stuff.
Okay.
I'm just asking for.
Oh, I see.
But really, like, for example, it's skin burning. You can restore that.
Okay, so surgery to restore,
With or abnormalities.
okay, so restore yourself to what you should look like.
Yeah.
What a normal person, look like, in order to improve. For example, get a dose. Hey guys, you have a smart.
Yes, like, things like that.
Yeah, yes.
Still in shape, certainly accounting,
Yeah.
this book, Joe, whatever the year.
It costs.
What was the first thing you do? When I noticed.
They need something.
They did check up. That's the one. That's the bird. Okay.
Yesterday's.
Okay, cool. You gave me sounds to body. That sounds like medical and I've heard of that in the gym.
It's so. Other.
And then you mentioned skin burns.
I don't. Well, what you got?
What is your?
Should that get?
Yeah, I'm very happy.
Yeah, it's like.
Just get them. Like I said, I can.
All right, 1 more minute left.
Something like.
But if I was able to argue that like.
Okay.
Then
Yeah.
that's if we change your, change. That's the last teacher.
And it should be worth much not that sense.
I know.
I think you should get it standing up, interject to make it a deeper job. Whatever we discussed today. I just think, yeah, things are beautiful. And the reason we find something beautiful.
If you like just go find.
Oh, this is really.
Yeah, that's the.
This would be a. Argue for it is like fossil or something.
All right, time is up. So we've got one student online who has some thoughts, and then we have several here who are going to share their thoughts. Bismillah. Okay, let's start with those who are arguing for plastic surgery.
So first thing I would say is that this is an issue of muamalat, so therefore it's permitted unless there's any evidence otherwise.
Okay, so we're doing our first point is that this is under the category of fiqh al-mu'amalat, not ibadat. So it should be permitted unless considered prohibited from some sort of evidence. Okay, sure, it's a good first point. What else?
Then I think we think it all depends on the intent of the underlying surgery. So for example, let's say you're in a car accident, your skin gets burned. Or let's say, you have a deviated septum issue, right? That's part of the difficulty treatment. Then really you're restoring your body's function to what is originally intended for the human body overall.
Okay, so restoring to
The intended function of
the intended function of the human body. So for example, a deviated septum or a car accident that requires skin grafts or something of that nature.
I think it's argue the intended. So like, you may have a deep skin burning, and that may look incredibly unappealing. And that may, subjectively speaking, not look normal. When someone say your arm or when someone. And so I think that would also fall under that.
Okay, so like for example, a deep skin burn that looks largely abnormal, and so to restore it back to its okay. So your stance is that it is permitted unless considered prohibited, and where you see it permitted is in restoring to the intended function of the human body. In the case of some sort of what sounds like deformity, maybe genetic mutation, maybe an accident. Okay. Um, but you put a boundary. So why do you put a boundary? You're saying only in these cases.
I would actually not put a boundary.
No boundary.
Yeah,
No boundary.
no boundary. I think that's fine, like, this is not my partner's position, but I would
Okay.
put a boundary because under the first principle, it's permitted under book otherwise.
Ah, okay. So
These are just example cases.
so let me give you an example. Is someone is born with a uh what's it called? A cleft lip, right? So there is like an abnormality in what looks like their lip, but it's something that occurs X percentage of time, and the doctors can or do not have to uh, intervene. What would you say?
I think if they want, you're normal, like as in like, 99% of people, they should have cure shots. I would see it as an issue.
Okay, so
Restoring.
okay, so it still looks like it's restoring to the intended function. What about you?
Yeah, look at
On the same. Okay. Now let's say a child is born. Let's not even say a child is born. A girl is 17 and all of her friends have really straight noses, and hers is a hooked nose. And it is an ancestral nose. All of her family has it. But she says, this is abnormal. I want to restore it to the intended normal human body. So she does her research and she's like, 85% of humans have a straight nose and only 15% have a hooked nose. This is not normal. And I want to get plastic surgery to bring it back to the majority's intended form.
I think that would also be considered reasonable.
Reasonable.
Yes, because if she doesn't do it, then at this point, she'll give you eye on out with respect to, like, even with respect to, like, partner selection, this will become, this may be seen as what's capable of concern.
Okay.
Um,
Bilqis, disagree?
surgery, no matter what type of surgery is invasive. At the end of the day, I think that, like, you're risking something for the sake of like, I guess, aesthetic.
Okay.
So, like, on the scale of like abnormalities, like a cleft lip, it could still like impede certain functions, whereas your nose like just not being the shape you like it to be, that's a different scenario. And so I think like you would weigh, okay, risking possibly, I don't know, messing the nose up even more versus keeping it the way it is.
Okay. All right, so we have a difference of opinion here on site. Let's see if someone online. This falls under necessity or removing hardship, which is allowed in the Sharia. So important conversation to go back to is what we talked about yesterday. 3 categories. Necessity, darura. Need, haja, and want, tahsiniya. Necessities, needs, and wants. Let's hear the other group and hear if we have some strong evidences against it. Because maybe if we have some strong evidences against any type of plastic surgery, it might create a boundary for us. What do you guys think? Misra and Safa.
First thing is that we mentioned, there's like, we're changing Allah's creation. Want. So that's like the number one.
Okay, so no changing Allah's creation out of want. Where does that come from?
Because like you're first of all, like your body's a matter, or like you cannot like do anything with it.
Body is an amana, it's a trust from Allah, so you can't do anything with it.
With it except like if it's necessary, that's okay.
Unless it's
But if you like want to fix something or like, oh, it doesn't look like right on your face, that's more.
okay, so want is not enough. Okay, so we have an ayah in the Quran that Allah says, Allah is the one who yusawwirukum fil arhami kayfa yasha. Allah is the one who shaped you in the wombs how He wishes, or He created you fi ahsani taqweem, in the perfect proportions, right? So these are the arguments used for those who say it would not be allowed to change the creation of Allah in a way that was not intended for it to be changed, right? You can work out, you can eat well, you can do X, Y, Z to change whatever, right? To an extent. There's even this element of you have bad body odor, so you can change that by, using deodorant, or even the allowance of makeup that is given for women, right? Or some sort of like, removing hair from arms or legs, whatever has been made permissible, right? Or parts of the face. But then there are parts that have been mentioned that these are things you cannot change, like tattooing the body, right? Tattooing the body is a permanent change. Henna, temporary. Tattooing, a permanent change, comes under the category of تغيير خلق الله. Also comes under the category of creating, not deforming the body, but what's the other word? What would it be called? Mutilating the body. So mutilation of the body is not considered permitted, except what's been permitted, like ear piercings, or according to some cultures, nose piercings. And then there are certain piercings that would be considered excessive and would be considered mutilation. Mutilation has been considered impermissible because on the battlefield, it was not permitted to do anything to even the dead bodies because of the sanctity of the human body. Do not mutilate even the dead bodies of your enemy. They are killed, they are killed. Don't do anything beyond that. There's still karama to the human body. So the act of taking out parts of their body or taking out their liver or taking out their heart was considered impermissible because of the sanctity of the human body. So because of the sanctity of the human body, karamatul insan, bani Adam, the sanctity of the children of Adam, because we have this hadith that says specifically do not mutilate the bodies, because we have these ayat that say you've been created in the best of creation and Allah creates you as He wishes, those are all the strong evidences for the default should be do not change the creation of Allah. Okay, let's hear from Mawahib. I can either read it, Mawahib, or if you want to speak, you're welcome to speak. If you open your mic, then you can. Otherwise, I'll just share what you've shared. Okay, bismillah. So Mawahib just gave his conclusion. Plastic surgery is only allowed when it's a necessity, a darura, like to reconstruct deformities, as the first group said. Plastic surgery for beautification is not allowed, so tahsiniya for wants beautification, without a valid reason, since it would be changing the creation of Allah, and it could also be considered wasteful spending, israf. These fall under the category of necessity or raf al-haraj, taking away, removing a hardship, which we would call a haja, a need, allowed in sharia, and changing the creation of Allah, taghyiru khalqillah, would be impermissible, generally speaking. Okay, so we have enough in terms of hair extensions and teeth filing, trying to make the teeth smaller, or tattooing that has been made impermissible, and even the shaping of the eyebrows, like big long conversation in women's fiqh we've had, but there's enough argument to say keep things as they are. Don't go changing things permanently or even semi-permanently, right? That changes hugely changes the way you look. Because you should be satisfied and happy with the way Allah created you, unless there's a mutation, deformity, accident. Where do we get this ruling from? How do we even know we can restore things to their original state? Two examples from the Sunnah. A man, during the battle, his nose was cut off. And the Prophet ﷺ said, get a nose molded from, I believe the first time it was from some sort of material. So he got a nose molded in the shape of his nose, and he created, right, a prosthetic nose. Why? He could have still survived. He probably could breathe. He probably could, the nose could function, but he was restoring it to the intended function or the intended look of the human body, right? And the Prophet ﷺ permitted this. And at some point, the Prophet ﷺ said, it smells, so use a different material, right? And so he used, I believe, something that was more of a metal, and he initially used something else. Another man had teeth missing, and he was permitted to put in false teeth, right? Put in false teeth. Why? He didn't need them, right? It wasn't necessary. He could still eat and chew with all of the teeth that he had, but he was permitted to create false teeth and place them with whatever mechanisms they had to restore it to its normal look. Right? There's the permittance for things like dyeing the hair, henna, and things like that. And so there are things that have been mentioned in the Sharia that talk about restoring something to its typically normal look. However, there has been the pushback against trying to make something different than what it originally is, like the teeth filing, right? So women were cursed for filing the teeth. Why? What that meant was your teeth they look like this, but what was beautiful at that time was smaller teeth. So they would file all the teeth to make them look like tinier teeth. So it was like all these tiny teeth with spaces in between, and that was looked at as beautiful, right? In fact, we don't understand that because that doesn't exist in our culture, but that was a way of beautification, but it required a lot of changing the creation of Allah, and that was considered a cursed action. One of the arguments is it's considered accursed because it was the action of the prostitutes at the time. And then the other argument is that it was taghyiru khalqillah, Allahu alam. But that is an example of don't change it from from whatever it looks like simply for beautification, right? If there was a reconstructive argument, then go for it. Okay?
That's like harming your body. You're putting your body in harm. Like, what if it didn't work? You have to do it more twice, third time.
Well, harming the body is one, but someone could argue plucking the eyebrows doesn't harm.
It does.
Oh, well,
Scientifically, it does.
it does. Oh, okay.
Like the cells of your eyebrows are connected to your brain, like, or for your eyes. It makes sense.
It makes sense. So some make sense and some are just ta'abudi and we just accept it as is because hair extensions don't really make sense because it doesn't probably hurt you. If you have short hair and you want it to look voluminous and beautiful.
Also, it goes under like lines.
Deception.
Yeah. Like,
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So these are all the reasons that these things are considered impermissible is changing the creation of Allah. There's obviously harm in some of these actions. There is mutilation of the body in some actions, like tattooing. And then there is deception. And a small amount of deception, like wearing some makeup, things like this, is a small amount of deception, is acceptable, right? So, dyeing the hair was permitted, right? But Aisha radiallahu anha said, if a suitor comes with dyed hair, he should announce that his hair is dyed, right? So that you're not deceiving the woman that I am a 30-year-old man, but he's like 60, right? So it's like, let her know that your hair is actually fully white because, 3 months into the marriage, when it goes fully white, she should have known that ahead of time. And the same for women, right? Same for women is if her hair was dyed and she takes the opinion that she can show some of her hair to the suitor, which is one of the opinions, minority opinion comes from the story of Jabir radiallahu anhu, then she should make it known that her hair was dyed. The issue with plucking the eyebrows or wearing excessive makeup, or if he was to have gotten bicep implants or she was to have gotten breast implants, whatever that may be. All of these things are deceitful. They are deceptions, not actually what the person looks like. And you are creating a false image of who you are, right? Even the plucking of the eyebrows is deception to an extent. And I have seen this in marriages where a woman plucks her eyebrow. I mean, we're not going to discuss the plucking of the eyebrows because that's the women's Fiqh conversation, but women who pluck their eyebrows regularly and it had a very specific look. And then they got sick after marriage, 2-3 months, and then their face looks completely different, right? Because if you've been plucking it to an extent where it looks very thin and all of a sudden it looks very different 2-3 months later, a person could say this was deceit. This is not what you looked like, right? It's not what you actually naturally look like. You are giving me a different version of yourself. Even that's why some people say when you wear makeup, wear it with i'tidal, moderation, right? Moderation, similar to the color, like the kohol is like a moderate amount, and the foundation or the blush is a moderate amount that is similar to the color of her skin, that is similar to what she looks like. Because there was the case, I think it was in the UAE. All these things make the headlines, and I'm always just like, what? That a man divorced his wife the day after he married her because it was a different face. He woke up to a different face. He's like, what? And she had been wearing such heavy makeup. And I know this seems like a very like superficial sort of conversation, but imagine the opposite. Like a man did like fully change his face entirely and he looked completely different through using whatever mechanisms he used. He used Botox and fillers regularly and he maybe did his eyebrow, whatever it was. And then he wakes up the next day or, a month later, and it's like all that is gone, right? And he never mentioned, oh, actually, my hair was dyed and I get Botox every day and I this, that, and the other. And it's like, oh, well, you're a completely different person. You were misrepresenting yourself. It goes both ways. So a woman and a man should not misrepresent themselves. There should be no tadlis or deception. But that's not the only reason for these rulings connected to plastic surgery. The other thing could be that a person goes ahead and gets plastic surgery for a hooked nose, for example, but the child comes out with a hooked nose. So then that was still an element of tadlis. We're not saying there's anything wrong with hook nose. What we're saying is that if it's within the realm of normal, then you keep it as is. If it's within the realm of medically known as a necessity or a need for change, then you change it, especially for a medical need. Now, there's one minority opinion that gives an exception for something that is so out of the norm and abnormal, but still within the realms of normal. What they mean is someone has a birthmark on their face that's like the size of their cheek, right? And the doctors say, we've checked it, benign, there's nothing wrong with it. This is actually within the realm of normal. It's just sort of like you got a really big birthmark on your face. So some scholars say if it leads to sort of mental instability of like, I look so abnormal, like people look at me and think I'm a monster or something of that nature. They say to that extent, then for hifdul aql, for the stability of the mind and the brain, they could say, well, while this is normal medically, so it's within the realms of abnormality, 1% of people have this, and it causes so much mental distress that a person could have it surgically changed, right, in whatever ways deemed medically possible, because this is a case of this is a like hyperbolic case, right? It's way out of the norm. And Allah knows best. This is a minority opinion, but you can see where it could make sense when you meet people who have difficulties or abnormalities as such, right? But really, like we talked about it in our fiqh class in Malaysia, and the teacher said, the hooked nose is not it. That's not it. That is within the realm of normal, right? But then he gave examples of what was not normal. A person has a sixth finger. They're born with a sixth finger. A person is born with an extra leg, like a small extra foot or extra toe. All of these things are within, it may be normal within, it's a mutation, but it's normal. Okay, 3% of people get this. But because it is considered so strange and abnormal, it would be looked at as abnormal, then it may be removed. And it's not functionally going to harm them to remove it and XYZ. I have, it's genetically within my sister-in-law's family for them to have six fingers. So she had triplets recently, and two of them were born with the sixth finger. And so the doctors are like, yeah, this is normal. It happens from time to time. They were tiny little fingers. They had little nails on them. We grew to think they were cute, right? But and they were actually not like fully functioning. They were just sort of hanging off. And at perhaps the 6 months mark, they're just hitting 6 months. At some point, the doctors will simply do something like put a very tight rubber band, cuts off circulation, and they'll fall off themselves like an umbilical cord would fall off, right? So this is within the realms of normal, within the realms of a normal mutation, but permitted to remove because it is not considered the norm in society. So that's sort of like that's a conversation that needs to be navigated with a scholar, and it needs to be on a one-on-one basis. You're not just like, oh, I read online, I can do what I like. Okay, my situation is like the sixth finger. I'll go ahead and get my plastic surgery. No, go talk to a scholar who's well read, who understands the full scope of this science, and ask about your specific issue, and then go for it. Allah. All right, I said we would just touch on this, but this fun conversation, and you guys got the main principles. In cases of necessity, reconstructive surgery, bringing something back to its intended function of the human body, burns, deviated septums, cleft lips, etc., or even hugely abnormal normal mutations, it would be considered permissible to change. Default is do not change the creation of Allah. Do not change the creation of Allah. Right? Let us go to milk banks. All right, so we talked about milk banks already because we talked about milk already a lot, and I think we're tired of talking about milk, but we're going to talk about milk a little bit more, just from the scholarly perspective. But what do you guys remember? What do you think was our conclusions on milk banks? So just explain what milk banks are. Milk banks are when women have excess milk, they pump that milk and they send it to a place to be filtered, pasteurized, sterilized, whatever it is, and then given, donated to other women who need milk because they can't produce milk, they were ill and they stopped producing milk, their child was premature, so their body never got to a point of even being able to produce milk. The hormones didn't come in yet. And so this milk is donated to those women to give to their children. So what do you think is the Islamic ruling on milk banks? And then by way of this conversation, we'll talk about donor breast milk for Muslim parents, specifically premature babies. Milk banks good or bad for the Muslim world? For Muslim scholarship. Good? Okay. Donate your milk to the milk banks and let that milk go to all these different children. Be the milk mother for all these different children in the world. Ah,
Things that- or a societal good
okay.
can
Public interest trumps individual interests. Okay. So you guys are, the outliers there saying, yes, create those milk banks. It's a necessity. Save a life. Whoever saves a life is like they've saved all of humanity. All right. I've made you guys radical. Okay, you're taking this opinion took a long time for the Muslim world to arrive at. Okay. We're in contemporary fiqh, so you guys are just like, probably yes. Yes. All right. Okay, let's hear the pushback. Why not? Why was it disallowed for centuries? Let's say it's only been discussed for a couple of decades. It's been discussed since milk banks arrived in 70s or so. So why did the Muslims say no till the 2000s?
get a message with lineage.
Messes with Hefdun Nasl, progeny, keeping up with the lineage. If your milk is distributed to 70 children who needed milk, you are now the milk mother of 70 children, and all of your children cannot marry those 70 kids. And now, how do you know if you did something right or wrong when it came to their marriage? Right? So we talked about in another conversation how milk kinship, great, creates this kinship, and now you have mahram relationship, and now it's like, well, milk kinship is also important to know and keep track of because it creates a mahram relationship, and your kids can't marry those kids. You can't marry those kids. You shouldn't be marrying those kids. It's a big age difference, but okay. Yes. So I'll share the story one more time. Dr. Yunus Ahmadi, Dr. Frank Placencia came to me at Mariam Islamic Center when I was female religious director. We sat up second floor in that beautiful pink and purple girls' halaqah room, and we sat down and we discussed a real issue happening in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit of Texas Children's Hospital, which was Muslims who delivered prematurely were being given donor breast milk, which was truly the right decision, best decision for these premature babies. And they were refusing it, saying, I can't have another woman's milk in my child. It creates this mahram relationship. I don't want that. And so alternatively, these children were being given formula, which is cow or goat related, synthesized milk, was fine for children who were born at the right age, but harmful for children who were born prematurely. They just weren't able to digest those types of hormones. They just weren't working well. And so 60% of those children, it created illness in them, and some of them it led to disease that ended their life. And so I think this is just, really like, this was a moment where it was like, man, all of the fiqh that we learned and all of these hypotheticals, like in Malaysia, they were talking about milk banks all the time. I was like, I'll never use this information. It sat here in 2018 in that room, and it was like, this is real and applicable. I need to know this. And I'm really glad those students presented on this. And then I researched the fatwa on it and found the thesis and the PhDs done on it, because it was just like, this is kind of interesting. I'll never need it, but I'll read about it. I was like, whoa. I have some information for you. I have several fatwa from the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s where they debated this, and I can provide this to you, right? And I provided them with that information. I wrote up a whole like summarized summary of these research papers because they were in Arabic, some were in English, and they were able to create that pamphlet to say, here's the allowance from the Sharia, right? That was like a really powerful moment for me, speaking truly like, oh, okay, I don't know anything, but okay, at least I can help here. So necrotizing enterocolitis is a serious intestinal infection that can be treated with antibiotics, often needs surgery, and can lead to death. It occurs after the initiation of milk, typically in premature babies who are formula fed. So that is the disease that occurs, NEC. And it occurs mostly in premature babies given formula milk. So we have the issue and we have the reason for the issue, right? The major reason that this takes place, that this disease or leading to death takes place, is because of premature babies who are formula fed. Human milk, however, had a lower incidence of NEC. So the children fed, the premature children fed human milk or donor breast milk, were given with either the mother's own milk or donor breast milk, had lower cases of NEC. Okay. What is formula? It's usually made by cow's milk. It is typically more harmful to preterm babies. Okay. Obviously, a mother's milk is best, but donor human milk is next best, meaning someone else's human milk. Since the introduction of donor breast milk, the incidence of NEC has fallen 60%. Okay, so NEC was common. Donor breast milk was almost like the medicine given to treat this digestive disease that occurred, and 60% of cases dropped. Milk banks in the world, probably exists elsewhere in different ways, but milk banks where milk is donated and cleaned and pasteurized and sterilized and put into these bottles, right, to be given to other women, starts in the early 1900s in Austria. Well, we don't hear much about it, not in the US, until the 80s, okay? The 70s and 80s. So the Human Milk Banking Association of North America begins. And this is not as people interpret it as. It's not just like, it's not like a lady at the farmer's market selling her milk. I mean, that exists, right? But the Human Milk Banking Association of North America that's connected to the hospitals is like a clinic, right? It's like a medical facility. It's not just a woman selling her milk or her cheese or whatever it may be at the farmer's market. This is a medical facility. And then, yeah, there was a whole issue with milk banks in the 80s because they thought AIDS was spread by milk and things like that. But that's not important to this conversation. Today, there are 24 US and 2 Canadian milk banks under this banner, which is the main governing medical institution that takes care of the human breast milk for hospital. Okay. So this is a relatively new issue, only in the last 100 years, right? What did they do in the past? Wet nurses, right? Very common in the Muslim world, must have existed in the Western world, Allahu Alam. I don't have information on that. But what did you do in the past? There was no formula. Someone else breastfed your child, right? Okay. So how does these milk banks work specifically under HMBANA? They are hospital bases. They are hospital-based clinics where mothers deposit their milk, and it is stored and prepared and donated. It's processed through a lab, and milk from 10 to 100 women are pooled that are pooled into these machines to pasteurize the milk and then distributed to the patients. It actually requires a prescription and it's not available to the general public. So this is a heavily managed system, very well maintained, but at the end of the day, completely anonymous. They are not maintaining the names of those 10 to 100 donors who are pooled together to give this one child milk. Just not part of their system. Right? So if a child at Texas Children's Hospital here in Houston is born preterm and the doctor says, would you like donor breast milk? And they go and they, reach out to they get the donor breast milk, they come bottle feed that child. 10 to 100 women are contributing to this child's health. Okay, so very hard to keep the lineage. 10 to 100 women's milk.
The milk itself is not just one woman. It's all the milk they call.
Yes, that's the way the system works here in these institutions in the US. Because they don't have any laws of the Sharia that they have to follow, they're not trying to follow any lineage laws, right? It's different. This is the way it works. This is the way. So I'm explaining to you how it works, right? They don't have Islamic Sharia to tell them what to do differently. So the way it works here, this is the way it works. Now, I did ask the doctors, I was like, isn't it the case that you're in the pregnancy ward and so the lady next door has milk and you don't? They said, yeah, in some cases that's possible. You strike up a friendship with the lady next door and the lady next door says, you can utilize this milk. The doctors may okay it on a case-by-case basis. But they're pretty wary because they're like, well, what if you have you've ingested something and that's not good for this kid, da, 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 da. So they're more weary than anything, right? Your neighbor next door has good milk, but what if you took some medications and it's going to harm this preterm baby? So really what they prefer is this full pasteurized process, especially for preterm babies. So he said in some cases here and there, like a sister or a cousin or the next door neighbors, of the pregnancy ward will offer that. And it's sort of like, don't ask, don't tell, you shouldn't do this, but okay. Because this is a hospital, they're liable for whatever takes place there, right? So it's very difficult to get that approved within the hospital system. Within the hospital system, this is how it works. So it's completely anonymous. You don't know who any of the women are because they're not concerned with hifth and nasl. Because it doesn't mean anything in American society whether you milk a child or not, right? So understandably why they don't care, right? And it's not to say they don't care, it's just it's not their process. Okay, so the issue then comes does this milk create milk kinship? And here are the ayahs, the mothers who breastfeed their children 2 years, forbidden to them are your milk mothers and sisters. So we're just reestablishing that, yes, milk does create kinship. And so then the question is, does the use of donor milk create that kinship? And isn't the anonymity of the donors problematic? Okay. The wet nurse is the murdi. The milk is called the laban. The infant is called the radi. We don't have to go into great detail there. Milk kinship creates a familial bond. They become mahram to one another. The milk brothers and sisters cannot marry. We've already gone over all of this. Now the fatwa. Sheikh Yusuf Al-Qaradawi, rahimahullah, who passed away in the last couple of years. He was a highly influential Sunni scholar from Al-Azhar University in Cairo. In the end, he was like the head of the Islamic Studies department in the university in Qatar. Also slightly controversial person. You can Google it. Like he sometimes came up with rulings that much of the Muslim world were like, we don't know how we feel about that. He's the first to say that women can wear loose pants, right? So he was a scholar. He was an amazing scholar. He said things that people were not always okay with, right? Sorry? Loose pants being one. Loose pants, you know, for centuries, women, the concept of pants were not permitted, but that's not entirely true. Pakistan, India, women have been wearing shalwar for forever, right? Shalwar, pants with their long dresses, right? But this concept of the Western pants, Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi spoke about loose pants, you know, kind of likening that arms can be loose but still show a shape. So legs could be loose and still show the shape, but that you should concentrate on the hips and the thighs being covered. So sort of like a till the knees kind of thing he was sort of giving that permission. It's like as long as the pants are loose. Just like you should consider the arms loose, should consider the pants loose. And for functionality, it's possible. Allahu A'lam. I'm not saying he's the guy who made pants famous. It's just like what we as women, it's like if anyone asks, we're like, yeah, Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi allowed it. So he spoke about a lot of other things. He talked about Muslims living in Muslims as a minority living in non-Muslim lands. He wrote an entire book on it. He spoke about when a non-Muslim a non-Muslim family and the wife converts to Islam, does she immediately have to leave her husband, or can there be a time period whereby she has time to convince him? She doesn't just have to be removed from him immediately. And he takes from the stories of the Sahaba that in some cases they were told, no, you were removed immediately, and in other cases they still considered each other spouses, and she tried to bring him to Islam. Like, does it immediately drop that aqd? So he spoke about a lot of like really like pertinent Western Muslim issues because he went and traveled in Europe and he came to learn like the Western Muslim narrative. And he's like, okay, this is not just hypotheticals. Like, we need to deal with this. They're dealing with a lot of issues. We need to come up with conclusions about them. So Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, great. I've never seen anything. I've seen a lot of translated books in English. We do an entire course here called The Empowered Muslim Woman. It's not Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi who wrote the book. It is Abdul Halim Abu Shukqa. So if you were in the class last semester, women's fiqh class, 6-volume book all about women, everything about women from beginning to end of the prophetic era, how they dress, how they interacted in society, etc. Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi is the one who mentored this writer through his book and gave him feedback, right? So very powerful in many arenas, but women see him as the champion of a lot of women's rights, not to push them into like the category of feminism or anything, but giving them their God-given divine rights, like you can wear colors that are not black, things like that. Right? Okay. Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi also was one of those who pushed for breast milk to be acceptable. He said in 1983, recognizing and seeing that there's these issues with premature babies, that the substitute, which is formula milk, was harmful. So he said that, no, let's do donor breast milk. It's a necessity. Consider it medicine. Consider it medicine and just give it as a necessity overrides prohibition. Don't worry about the nasl. Don't worry about the progeny. give the milk to these children so they survive. Because saving a life is like saving all of humanity. So this was his opinion. He said that suckling does not even occur. It's just given in a bottle. So his opinion was that if it was done by suckling, yes, you can create the mahram relationship. But this is just bottles, right? We already talked about how some people who said, no, by bottle also creates the mahram relationship. And he said the reality is the identity of these women is unknown. So we're just in a situation where they are unknown. We can't know them, right? We can't discover who they are because that's not how the Western system works. And so he said one should side with leniency in public interests. That concept of public interest overrides personal interest. Your personal interest is I don't want my child to be related to 100 women and marry the wrong child. And he said, public interest overrides this. If we say no to donor breast milk, so many children will suffer. So remove your concern with this lineage issue, because that's hifdhun nasl, protection of progeny. And he said, it is trumped by hifdhun nafs, protection of the human body. And that's where we talked about maqasid al-sharia, some trump others. Deen and nafs, protection of the faith and the person's life, sometimes trumps mal, their wealth, nasl, their progeny, and aql, mind. There's a hierarchy. And so he said the hierarchy has to be put in place here. We care for the child's life more than what issues it creates in terms of lineage. So we'll be lenient in terms of the lineage issues. And he sort of said, like, we'll just dismiss it. He's not mahram. That child who took that milk is just not mahram to any of those children. We're dismissing the whole issue. This was just medication that was necessary. Just like if alcohol had to be taken in a case of necessity, just like if you had to eat pork because you're starved and you're in the prison, he's like, this is the only option available to these premature babies. You're either letting them die, possibility of dying or great harm, or you're giving them the medication, which is donor breast milk. Okay. So Al-Qaradawi said the quantity of the milk is important. He said if it's 10 to 100 ladies, you're not going to get enough milk from one lady to create milk kinship, because one of the rulings of milk kinship, according to some, is it has to be 3 full sucklings or 5 full sucklings, 5 full feedings. So you really wouldn't get 3 to 5 full feedings if you have 10 to 100 women's different anonymous milk. So you're just getting a couple sips from a couple of women, so none of it creates any type of kinship. The rebuttal is the Hanafiya, Malikiya, and some Hanabila say even a little bit of milk institutes kinship. So they disagreed with it. They said no, still institutes kinship with just a sip. The Shafi'i and majority of Hanbali say no, it must be 5 full feedings. Otherwise, it does not institute kinship. So he was going with the Shafi'i and Hanbali opinion, or that opinion that I need 5 full feedings, and we just don't get that with these vats of 10 to 100 different ladies. Al-Qaradawi's rationale, no single donor gives enough milk to create that bond, that 5 full sucklings, and 100 different donors' milk for each bottle, and the donor is not identifiable. We already mentioned this. The initial response in the 1983 Islamic Organization for Medical Sciences was rejection. Again, in 1985, he presents this, the International Islamic Fiqh Academy. They reject it again. Okay. They said this is just a non-issue because they're talking about the Muslim world. They're like, we are in the Muslim world. We don't need to institute milk banks and worry about this lineage issue. We don't have this issue. We call the wet nurse and she takes care of the child. So they were just like, we don't want to rule on this because we don't have this issue yet. Let's not open up this can of worms. And they said, we'll follow the prophetic tradition to follow a more cautious approach in issues of public interest rather than a more lenient approach. Okay, and they said, because even a small amount, even a sip counts to kinship, so they just said, we're closing this door, closing the milk bank conversation. And so it was rejected in a couple of different fatwa councils. Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi's was rejected. In 2004, the European Council for Fatwa and Research went ahead and looked at this issue once more, and they agreed that since we're now focusing on Muslims in the West, we do need to really deal with this issue. There are so many milk banks, and they are taking care. They have a lot of controls for infection and things like that. And there's clear benefit of human milk over the formula. So they said, الضرورات تبيح المحظورات. In cases of need, that which was impermissible becomes permissible. And so they permitted it in a 2004 fatwa. And so that's the Western Muslim world agreeing that this is permitted. Muslim world still not on board with milk banks. Haven't created any. I think the first milk banks were created in that's close to the Muslim world in Singapore, right next to Malaysia. So Malaysia is like really onto this because they're like, Singapore created it. What do we do? You know, do we create it with lineage and so it doesn't exist yet, as far as I know. Last time I was researching this, there were no Muslim milk banks in the Muslim world. But Western Muslims accept this as a possible solution because it's a necessity and a need.
Is it even legal?
Is it even what?
Legal, like in Muslim. To have them like think right
I don't know. But a lot of people are still taking care of other children through nursing them. And it may even be that a person is extracting milk and giving it to people, but not on this level of like institutionalized milk banks, things like that. As far as I know, someone can research it and let me know. As far as I know, I don't believe milk banks exist in the Muslim world yet. Okay, but in the Western world, they exist, so the Muslims had to reconcile with that. So they came back and said, Al-Qaradawi, yes, we agree with you. Many years later, we agree with you. You were onto something there. And I can share with you guys an English like PhD or thesis on the whole topic. I was just like such a brilliant read. Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi was like so far ahead of his times. He was always just looking into what he saw was going to be a potential issue, harm, or benefit. And it always took the Muslim world a long time to be like, okay, yes, we agree. We agree with this. And that's why he has like sort of a interesting reputation. He was, at Al Azhar and believe had to be moved to Qatar for political reasons, right? When someone says things that the government is not so happy with, they remove them. Right. So I think his opinions were causing them some distress. Allah. All right. Our last and final, is it time to take a break? It is, right? All right. We'll come back at 12:15 and we'll do our last and final conversation on abortion. And I do believe we'll have the chance to end early. Sure. Good stuff, guys. Good stuff. It's like lots of milk. We're done with malt milk now.
Flashlights.
Sorry.
Thank you for the flashlights. That
Maybe it happened in our semester. Like, all the topics for women issues were the contemporary definitions. Why? I'm sure if you look at them.
But like, yeah, I don't think I said anything. This is why I don't know. I'm using. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure I found work. Well, you said it's on my way home. Yeah, from work, I'm still with the reasons. I didn't mean you to get on. Yeah. We still like that same person. We still don't have a problem. Pay for it. It's insane. This is like saying it's worse. Oh. I do that. Yeah. This is nice and this. I was like, it's fine. No, okay, it's, I love to speak. That works in government. How's that going to the thing? Yeah, something like that, like, it's just, I just feel like you just talking too much. Yeah, but like, what from is just static and that doge. You guys like, oh no, it's just like, I was like, what? Oh, that's not working for that. Not working for anything. But they are, like, they went to their office. You know, so, yeah. Oh, really? You went right there.
Sorry, it's just,
But
where's it located?
I don't know where the village office is, but they're like going to all these different government organizations.
That's pretty cool.
No, because they want to fire people.
Yeah, they just
Wait,
like,
wait, you have records?
No, my dad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. My dad is not Dutch, but like Trump like is assigning people to
Yeah.
go to yeah, he works in
Each
a government
department.
job, so
Yeah. What's your dad do is in accounting or something?
no supply chain.
Supply chain.
Yeah. But it gets annoying because like he doesn't want to stay there. He wants to come to Houston because of what happened with Trump.
I think Roger went back and get the officers. Right.
Yeah, they call everyone back into the office, but they're also like, if you try to like leave and let's say like go to another department, you're basically like, it's like you're starting over, and so you're more expendable. Yeah. So now he's just stuck.
yeah.
Inshallah. Yeah, he wants to go back to Houston or in Texas. He doesn't like DC. It's fun. No, because he doesn't go out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe closer to your family, so. Lots of long day, miss going there. It's gonna be interesting. He seems to be doing a couple of years. Like, when it's with their so long for long enough for them. Right, what? Well, like, there's something about, yeah, I don't know. Well, there's something about. Oh, yeah. So yeah, what that makes it. Oh, right. Yes, it's like government. Like, that's good. But what did it? And yeah, I like Jamaican stories like very here that she really started to eat things. Section is the yeah, like true. Everybody's working for students. Remember, I'm really rich the brains. Yeah, even like the chairfish. You know, like air would go. She was really, so it was just like. My 6 years was in there for like almost a month ago, yeah, like, no, those like, just like detention there in Louisiana or like, what this, like, they're trying to move here. I'm going to Louisiana for my cousin's graduation, I'm like, I didn't got me. Yeah, I was like, I'm here, my passport, I need this point. No, I'm gonna just bring my passport, I never even think that, like, just in case.
Well, do you have the real ID? Yeah. Yeah, carry that, because I wouldn't take my passport. Yeah. I don't even when I use reading. There was this one guy that's weird. That was like 40. I don't even know what happened. You can do the passport part. No, which is easy. But they said if you have more, you should be good. Yeah, if you have the passport part, it's considered as the passport. Oh, okay. I've never had instead of taking your passport when you're it's like yeah. Cause I was like, I thought you wanted to do because like times like I guess some people thought that they had the real ID and then like I guess they didn't. Well, the real ID is a little bit white. Yeah. It has a star. Yeah. I saw that. Founding the star. That is the same. Yeah. But I know the password card is like $100. Okay, that's not bad. Yeah. Locals traveling international now, like risks. No. But you hear like at the border, like they always like, oh my girl, I'm leaving. Yeah, internationally. They do. Like they get asked questions more than you know, of course. Wait, just don't look suspicious. Is that where it's the hijab like question? Yeah, like so usually I will travel, I would pack a bunch of books because I am like a hijab and I'm marginalized. I can put more stuff in my pockets. So I usually do that. This time I mean you didn't attempt to do that because it looks suspicious to be honest. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm also freaking out about traveling. Just trying to go back home or just some other places, but like she just needs to. I just don't like just don't have anything suspicious on your phone. Yeah, I thought it's a lot of space. I feel like they already have access to everything. That's what I thought. So yeah, I feel like they already have access to us. Yeah, they figure these.
All right. Assalamu alaikum. We are starting our last and final portion of our contemporary fiqh class, and that is on pregnancy and abortion. Okay, this is just a one slide about pregnancy, and the rest are, I believe, on the concept of abortion. So we'll discuss pregnancy. Number one, some modern day issues connected to pregnancy. Typically, we talk about this in the women's fiqh class, but if I'm remembering correctly, we never get to this slide, so that's probably why I put it here. Birth control is considered permissible, makruh according to some. The permissibility is given because of a practice at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, which is called azal or pulling out, right? There's no shyness in religion, and we must know what the fiqh says. So pulling out is simply that a husband and wife are engaging in intercourse, and before he ejaculates, he removes himself. Therefore, the sperm does not enter into the woman. Okay, this is azal. It was considered a practice of birth control, meaning one was engaging in intercourse without the intention of becoming pregnant, reproducing, which in some faiths is not permissible. I mean, I'm not entirely sure, but I remember talking to a Catholic once, and she had said, she's an older Catholic lady, and she said, we only engage in intercourse for reproduction. There's no allowance of what's calling spilling the seed and allowing it to go for any other reason besides reproduction. I was like, okay, that's really interesting. Islamically, the practice was that one may engage in this just for the permissibility of engaging in the act without intending to have children, so long as it was not a permanent solution. So the scholars said permanent birth control is not permitted, but temporary is for things like family planning. You don't want to have a child at this very moment, or you've had a child and you want to wait, whatever it may be. Or you've had 2, 3 children and you wish to not have more children in the future. All of these reasons are permitted. What's not permitted is permanent forms of birth control that absolutely remove the ability to have children. So temporary, by qiyas, by analogy of azal, pulling out being permitted. Alhamdulillah. Um, by yeah, yeah. Alhamdulillah, what do you say? Um, by virtue of azl being permitted, so other forms of birth control have been generally permitted by the scholars so long as they are temporary. Things such as condoms, things such as birth control pills, things such as um, birth control patches or IUDs, intrauterine devices. All of these things are generally considered permissible because they are temporary, right? You can stop taking the birth control pills. You can remove the intrauterine device. Don't utilize the condom, for example. It has to be the consent of both. So both have to agree to be doing this birth control. It has to be safe and it cannot prevent children altogether. So vasectomies and hysterectomies would not be permitted in Islam unless considered medically necessary by medical professionals. So I know many people who are in this category. The doctor has said, you've had 2 births. They were very high risk. They were very dangerous. If you have another child, you could put your life in danger, right? This is the case for some women. Their bodies it's not a good decision to continue to go through childbirth. Childbirth can be a very taxing thing on a body, and it can be a completely not taxing process on a body. Everybody is different, right? And so, in the case where a woman is given this encouragement from a doctor not to try to conceive again, then they may go through a process that would permanently disable them from having children for a medical reason, medical necessity.
What if like they have enough kids?
If they have enough kids and they don't want any more, they can practice all of the practices of temporary birth control, like use of intrauterine devices, birth control, condoms, pulling out, but typically would not have the allowance to do a permanent form of birth control, right? So they can utilize all the other skills. It might be that they are still they're going to not ever want to have children, right? Like it's like we've had 5 and we don't intend or want to have more. This is not considered permanent birth control because you have had children. You've done the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, which is to increase his ummah, right? And now you are for, you could say, like mental health purposes, like, okay, if I have more children, I'm going to go crazy or something like that, right? But it can't be for the reason, one of the reasons it cannot be, the scholars agree, is for uh, risk, for fear of poverty. Because Allah says in the Quran, لا تقتلوا أولادكم خشية إملاق. Do not kill your children for fear of uh, poverty. Because نحن نرزقهم وإياكم. Allah says, because we're the one who provides for them, and you don't. We provide for them. So this is talking about especially like, do not kill your child after they've been born for fear of poverty. But then it goes to do not abort a child in your womb for fear of poverty. And then it even goes to do not prevent a pregnancy from taking place for fear of poverty. For other reasons, great. Family planning. I'm in a phase of my life where I don't want more children. I'm, working on my studies right now for the next 2 years. All of that is fine and permitted, right? If azl was permitted, the act of pulling out was permitted, it meant that people had reasons that they did not want children at that moment, and that was permitted. So long as it's not permanent. You've akthiru ummat Muhammad, you've increased the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, alhamdulillah, you're good. Any questions on birth control? We're going through this one fast, and then we're going to jump to abortion.
How about stuff like Plan B, like those?
Emergency pills, that comes more under the category of abortion. Yeah. Because it can be considered that, conception is taking place and you are now trying to I guess I should know more about Plan B and the emergency pill and things like that. But I've heard of scholars who have allowed it, but only in special cases, right? It's going to cause a great deal of mental stress, etc. Uh, Someone has just had a child, they just gave birth, and now, uh, they're at a place couple months later where they're able to have another child and they realize, oh no, like mentally, I'm not going to be able to manage this, right? Allah. But not just for no reason. You should have taken the precautions beforehand, or قدر الله ما شاء فعل. Whatever Allah wills is we accept it. Okay, but yeah, take your precautions ahead of time. There is the allowance for the emergency pill in special cases. IVF, in vitro fertilization, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. It's permissible if it is the sperm of the husband and the egg of the wife. So long as these two people are married, sure, you can take the sperm from him and the egg from her, grow it in under, the right conditions outside of the womb and then place it back in the womb. No issue, because that's the husband and that's the wife. Problem is, if you get a sperm and an egg from someone else and then place it into a woman who cannot bear children, this is problematic because it's not her egg and it's not her husband's sperm. And now we have issues, right? Whose child is this? Also, the sperm of a man who's not her husband, this is not considered permissible in a foreign woman, right? Too many issues come from that, of nasl, of progeny, who inherits from whom, and also this would be considered, according to some scholars, they say, well, it's not the act of zina, it is the result of what would take place in zina, a child out of wedlock, so it's not permissible. A child out of marriage, she's not married to that man, but she has his child, so it would not be permissible. Okay, would surrogacy be considered permissible? We said only in the case of a man who has two wives. And that would be because it is her husband's sperm that's in her body. If it is a unrelated woman and a husband and wife are trying to put their child in this unrelated woman, still problematic, because that is another unrelated man's sperm in her body. It's the result of what would take place because of zina. A woman giving birth to a child to a child whose father she is not married to. Okay, so surrogacy would only be permitted if it is the husband's, he has two wives, an egg and a sperm from one is put into the other. Still issues of whose child that is in terms of the woman, the one who birthed the child or the one who gave the egg, but no question about who is the father. And there's going to be differences of opinion on surrogacy. Whose is the child? Is it that woman's or that? And, I'm sure it'll be continuously debated, and on a case-by-case basis will always be debated, especially if emotions are involved. Okay, let's discuss abortion. What do you guys think? What do you guys think is abortion permitted in Islam? That a man and a woman become pregnant and they decide, or she decides, or he decides, we don't want this child. So let us induce an abortion through medical means, through whatever means. Isqat al-janin, like the dropping of the fetus is what it's called in Arabic. What do you guys think?
I don't think so, because it's Quranic ayat that says.
Okay, the Quranic ayah says, do not kill your children. لا تقتلوا أولادكم خشية إملاق. So it seems like there's a pretty strong precedence for not killing children. Okay, you were saying and?
Yeah, and it was a common meaning of practice before Islam. Sex, their sets, one daughters, and there's a part of at least human nature that's already disgusted by them.
Okay, and so there was the practice of there was a practice amongst the Arabs to after giving birth to a female, to a daughter, that they would bury that child alive. And of course, that practice is abhorred, disgusted, and outlawed in Islam. وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ, Allah says, and for the buried young girl, she will be asked, for what sin were you killed? And it's a rhetorical question going back to the parents. She was sinless. Why was she killed? For what reason was she executed? What did she do to deserve this punishment? She did nothing. And so she will not be responsible. The one who murdered her would be responsible. And this became outlawed upon this ayah. Which is different from abortion because this is birthing the child. This is burying a child alive. Abortion would be removing a fetus from the womb.
Is there any sunnah stories that we know about? Because I never heard in my life.
Not that I know of some it may be, but as I've studied this, no one has mentioned it. But Hira has something to say. Go for it, Hira.
So, my take on abortion is that it is permissible if it's 120 days and then it has, if, if it's, I'm so sorry for the background noise, but
Okay.
so if it's a concern to mother while birthing the child, or the child have some developmental issues, and if they get to know about it before 120 days, I think it's permissible for them to abort the child. But
Okay.
now here's the thing, like, now, I mean, how much the medical science is evolving, some of the abnormalities can be detected after 120 days. And sometimes it is unknown, like after 120 days have been passed, you get to know, oh, my child have certain Down syndrome or certain abnormality which was not detected previously. I mean, what can be done in that situation? That's my first question. And then my second thing would be on the lines of abortion, is that, I mean, even in today's, like, in our subcontinent, there are people with pagan mindset, and if they know that the child, if a woman is pregnant and she's pregnant with a girl child, they pressurize the woman to abort the child. And they just, they have that mindset that they want a boy, they want a male kid to come in their family to to take down their lineage, and they do that. So, I mean, it's even though it's just, there's just so much.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Thank
anyways, but
you.
that was my first question was actually really concerning, because I'm pregnant right now. just to bring that in, and yeah, just wanted to put that out. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Hira. First of all, you pinned down the scholarly discussion on the topic. Specifically, 120 days is mentioned. Specifically, tashwih. I don't want to say the word. It'll be in the slides. Deformity, abnormality that is not compatible with human life, discovered before 120 days, is one of the opinions of permissibility of abortion. And beyond 120 days, strong prohibition, unless in the case of the harm to the mother's life. So Hira has taught our lesson today. I'm kidding. You did it. You said it all. Obviously, there's multiple other opinions, but that is an excellent summary. We'll go into some of the other opinions. What can one do after 120 days? Not much, and we'll talk about that. And what about people who abort a child simply because they're female? Haram. They will be given their punishment on the Day of Judgment. Sinful. It's essentially like you didn't have a reason outside of a social pressure absolutely impermissible. It's been made impermissible in the Quran, right? Specifically, those young girls who are buried, they were buried for the same reason. This child, this girl, she's not going to help me on the field. She's not going to help me make money. Actually, in pre-Islamic Arabia, I have to gather a huge dower to even marry her off. This is just a burden on us. So it was a societal reason that they killed their daughters. And so, unfortunately, we are riddled with similar societal ills today because we're human beings, right? And but it's just as impermissible now as it was 1400 years ago. And Allah knows best. All right, abortion. Whoever kills, the ayah we were saying, and whoever saves a soul is as if they have saved all of humanity. Well, right before it in Surah Ma'idah is, and whoever kills a soul, unless for a soul or for corruption done in the land, it is as if he had slain mankind entirely. What does this mean? Unless for a soul or for corruption? It means you killed someone, so you murdered someone, therefore you're given the capital punishment. That is permitted. You can execute a person because they killed someone else and they went through the due course of law and they've been found to be guilty, and now you can kill a person. Or for corruption done in the land, so any of the punishments that require death, right? So death is given for hiraba, which is like a form of like what you would say like bandit preluding to war, like you're stopping people in the middle of the road and you're creating a warlike situation, things like that. Somebody could be executed for that, hiraba. And also for adultery, a married individual committing zina is the punishable by execution, and then killing, murder. So it's saying if you take a life besides those reasons which were given permission, it's like as if you have killed mankind, all of mankind entirely. And so those who say abortion is not permitted, or why it would not be permitted after a certain point, is because they're saying you're killing you're killing a person. It's murder, right? But they quantify that time period for which it is considered impermissible to kill a person. We'll mention the ayah we already mentioned. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ خَشْيَةَ إِمْلَاقٍ, and do not kill your offspring for fear of poverty. نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُهُمْ وَإِيَّاكُمْ, it is we who provide for them and for you. إِنَّ قَتْلَهُمْ كَانَ خِطَأً كَبِيرًا, surely killing them is a great sin. So absolutely not allowed would be the reason for abortion, would be that I just don't have enough money, I can't take care of this child. And you would be surprised by how many people give that reason. That's a difficult economy, it's inflation, it's a very difficult time right now, yes. But Allah is specifically saying that is not the reason to abort a child. Because you think you were taking care of them, but Allah is. That child is growing in that womb without you doing anything. That child will grow and take all of your nutrients and take all of the necessities, because Allah is the one protecting that child. And after birth, Allah is going to provide and take care of them. If you didn't, Allah would provide for them. Like if you abandoned them, Allah would find a way to take care of them if that was the will of Allah. So don't think that it is your hand that is feeding. It is through the will of Allah. Allah will put barakah in this child and add more blessings in your life and give them the rizq that was actually ordained for them, because every person is given their own rizq. So it's just a lesson for us that Allah will make it work. Yes.
I just have a problem because I looked up an article a while back and the statistics show that that's one of the main reasons. Like just in general, not Muslims, but people in general to get abortions because of the lack of financial assistance.
Yeah. So Bilqis is just mentioning that there was an article that mentioned the number one reason, or one of the main reasons for people to consider or to abort a child is for financial reasons. And Allah is addressing that very directly in the Quran. It's not addressed, it's addressed by do not kill your girls, right? And that was for societal reasons. And then do not kill your children. not for financial reasons. And so we have to be very wary about those. And we as human beings fall into both of those traps very easily. No, 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 no. We can't be pregnant. Okay, what are the options? Okay, I read this one article that says it's okay before 120 days, go and do it. But what was the reason? What was your reason? Was it there was a mental health issue or a physical health issue, or was it really just you thought financially you couldn't take care of it? That would be an impermissible reason. Impermissible reason. Or because you found out it's a girl and societally you don't accept, your family does not accept. Impermissible reason, sinful. Okay. All right, let's continue. So then the question becomes if killing a soul is like killing all of mankind, then when does ensoulment take place? That's where the big question is. If abortion is killing of a soul, so then the scholar said, well, then we need to know when that piece of flesh becomes a soul. Does it become a soul the day that conception takes place? Does it become a soul the day that it connects to the womb of the woman? Does it become a soul the day it gets a heartbeat? When does it become a soul? All of that hinges on this one hadith. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the creation of you humans is gathered in the form of semen, a nutfa, in the womb of your mother for 40 days. Then it becomes a clinging thing, an alaqa, in a similar period. Then it becomes a lump of flesh, mudgha, like that. Then Allah sends an angel who breathes the life into it. So very specific hadith, authentic narration. All of the schools of thought use this hadith to come up with their timeline for ensoulment. When is the ruh blown into that body? Therefore, after that moment, killing it is killing a soul. Before that moment, killing it is not killing a soul. That's the argument in Islamic literature. And it's a similar argument in Christian theology. When does ensoulment take place? Therefore, their rules for abortion differ.
They discovered that, like, I think around the 120-day mark is when we start.
SubhanAllah. That was, you said you read that in
That was another.
another article.
Yeah.
All right, Bilqis, you need to send us some of these articles. Yeah. It's pretty cool when the science matches up with, the reality Allah taught us. It's not always the case. So we don't read science into the Quran. We read the Quran and say maybe science will catch up or not. Maybe science will figure it out or not. Because today they might say, yes, the pain starts at 120, and then another report comes and says, no, we feel pain at day 1. And now it's like, oh, the science doesn't match with the Quran. No, the science never needed to match with the Quran. It's catching up with it. And sometimes it figures it out and sometimes it doesn't. But that's great. That's cool that someone somewhere figured it out. That there's some sort of change that takes that place at the 120-day mark. So the scholars actually differ. Is it 40 days, 80 days, or 120 days? And it's based on this hadith because the number given in the hadith is 40. So some scholars say, well, within 40 days, all 3 stages take place. The nutfa, the alaqa, and the mudgha take place within 40 days. And the other scholars say, no, the reading is 40 days, it is a nutfa. Then at 40 days more, it is an alaqa. And then 40 days more, it is a mudgha. And then the soul is blown into it. And that's the majority opinion, is they say it's 3 sets of 40 days, which means 120 days. 40 times 3, 120, which is 120 divided by 30 is a 4-month mark-ish, right? 120 divided by 30 is 4 months. So around the 4-month mark of after conception, the ruh is blown into the body according to the majority, looking at this hadith. So the first 3 stages each last 40 days, 120 days, the ruh has breathed into the body. The second strongest opinion is just 40 days for all 3 stages, just the interpretation of the hadith, that everything happens in those 40 days. And then an opinion that I've never quite understood is that 80 days. So then we understand it to be 40 and then 80 and then 120. I don't know where they get the number. It's 2 sets of 40. Allahu A'lam. The angel comes to the fetus multiple times, once at 40, 80, and one final time at 120. But they believe the ensoulment takes place at the 80-day mark. Allahu A'lam. Minority opinion. Either 120 or 40. Makes a big difference. That's a month in, and that's 4 months in, right? The majority opinion is 4 months. So if we take the majority opinion that it is 4 months, then the ruling becomes well, let's share the opinions. Number 1, is abortion allowed? Number 1, not allowed for fear of poverty. That's unanimous. All scholars agree. If it's for fear of poverty, simply that's the reason you want to abort. Absolutely not. Not at any point. Not between 0 days and 9 months. Number 2, not allowed to abort a child at all, generally speaking, default ruling. If you kill a person, it's like killing all of mankind. So the Malikiyya and Shafi'iyya pretty strongly saying no abortion is allowed at all. Okay? That is to say they still allow it if a mother's life is in danger. So that they say, well, of course, in necessity, it is allowed. But no other reason other than the mother's life is in danger if she were to continue this pregnancy. And they allow that at any point in the pregnancy, 0 to 9 months. And that's everyone. Everyone allows it according to necessity. You save the mother and not the child, because the mother's life is a haq. The mother's life is true and real. There's yaqeen in it, there's certainty in it. And fihi shak, in the child's life who's unborn, there is shak, there's doubt that it would survive upon birth. So you always save the mother. So even when we say Maliki and Shafi'iyya don't allow it, everyone allows it in case of necessity for the mother's, when the mother's life is in grave danger or great harm. Okay? The Hanabila, the Hanbalis say they take the opinion of the 40 days. Some of the Hanbalis. So they say out of necessity, up to 40 days, you can abort the fetus, fear of the mother's life. And then they say there's even a reason that it could be for need. We said 3 categories: necessity, need, want. Necessity was leads to death or great harm. Need is it leads to great harm but not death, or leads to a great harm but not the greatest harm. And then need, want. So they say not for any reasons of want. What would be a reason of want? Like, I just don't feel like having a child right now. I'm going to be in school for 2 more years. That's a want. I just don't feel like having a child right now. I had a child 3 years ago. I wanted a 5-year gap. That's a want, right? What they considered need, according to the Hanabila, was rape. So they considered rape a need. That if a woman was raped, then it was considered a need, and she saw it as a need to remove this fetus from her body, then she could remove it before the 40-day mark, according to the Hanabila, because of the mental strain it would cause for a woman to give birth to her rapist's child. Also, she has now the burden of taking care of a child who is not her own, like all of the things that come with that. And likely this child will be given up for adoption, not cared for by neither the mother or child. It's a child out of a criminal act. So for all of those reasons, the Hanabila said rape is a reason that she may abort a child. Let me jump to the next one and I'll come back to zina. Physical or mental inability to raise the children. This is important. The doctor says physically this is not going to be, this is going to be a very difficult situation for you if you were to take care of this children, to give birth to this child. So say someone has a debilitating disease like multiple sclerosis and they become pregnant and their doctor says, this is going to take such a huge toll on your body. You won't die, but you will not be able to take care for this child. It will probably cause much more difficulties for you. Before the 40-day mark, the Hanabila would allow it because of a physical ailment or a mental ailment. Maybe the scholars have deemed this person majnoon, completely mentally unstable, or a category before majnoon where they are temporarily, from time to time, having mental instability, like severe mental illness, like schizophrenia, right? Things where like they black out and they don't know what they did and they don't remember what actions they took, or their mind is not their own. They're not able to, they'll say, I don't even know what I was thinking at that point, right? So categories of majnoon or similar to it, if a medical professional said it's unsafe for you to take care of a child mentally, then before the 40-day mark, the Hanabila would allow it. As for zina, this is an interesting category because it's like if you committed zina, you should bear the consequences, right? But this Hanabila said, in the case of a woman who committed zina, she had a child, she committed zina, she had intercourse with a man outside of wedlock, and because of this action, the consequence is she will likely be killed by her family or tribe. In that case, she would be permitted to abort the child for protection of the woman's life. It's not to say she can just get away with zina. It's to say that there's a likelihood because of the culture in which she lives that there would be something like an honor killing. Like she lives in a village in the outskirts of, this town of this country, most likely a Muslim country, unfortunately, where they would find a way to remove her. She's never known again. People don't know what happened to her. They killed her because they did not want to be dishonored by this out of wedlock pregnancy. If that were the case, the Hanabila say she may find a way to abort the child. Though that's haram, we're protecting her life, even though she's still sinful for the action she took. She'll still have to face Allah for having committed zina, but she won't have to be killed by her family by it. This is talking about the case of a woman who committed zina out where she's not married. Because if she's not married, the Islamic punishment is not death, it's actually 80 lashes. It's lashes. Sorry, I can't remember them out. So if she were to be lashed by Allah but killed by her family, that's an unfair punishment. They don't have the right to take her life. So they say in that case, then it would be permitted for her to do isqat al-janin, abortion of the child. And then finally, up to 40 days, the Hanabila allowed the abortion of the child for the reason of extreme fetal deformity incompatible with normal life. So within 40 days, the doctors say the lungs are not progressing, like they have stopped. It's a 4-week-old set of lungs. Oh no, 4 weeks is 4 days. Oh, whatever they may say. They say that there's like a hole in the brain, like there's some huge deformity. This child is not either not going to survive, or if it survives, it's not going to lead a normal life at all. It's going to be incompatible with a normal life. They don't consider Down syndrome in this category, by the way. They don't consider Down syndrome in this category. Maybe some scholars do, but when we were studying it, they said Down syndrome was not put into this category. And maybe that's just a personal opinion of some mashayikh that it is compatible with normal life, and people who have children with Down syndrome could probably argue for or against that. So I'm sure it's a very sensitive topic. Yes.
Don't most children who are born with cancer go? Like, my understanding is that stuff that 48 or at 20, I would say.
I don't know the research on Down syndrome. I just know that I have family members and I have friends, and I only have my own experiential knowledge, which is it's difficult for these families, but I've seen those people go on to lead somewhat of a normal life, and in many cases, not much of a normal life. But it's different than uh, a great mental deformity where they can't feed themselves and they can't use the restroom themselves and they can't speak, right? Extreme mental deformity is actually very different from Down syndrome. And I'm speaking in a topic that I don't know depth about Down syndrome, right? But I'll just mention that some scholars generally mention that Down syndrome is not incompatible with life, that it can be compatible with life. Allah.
So if they do happen to have Down syndrome and they can't talk, because I have seen cases where they're not able to speak at all.
Yeah.
With that, once I into the reborn, right?
The reborn already. Yeah, Allahu Alam. I think this is something that requires much deeper analysis. This is just me talking about reading it, the scholarly analysis from, it could be one opinion. And I'd imagine there exists an opinion who, like, it's a spectrum of what they consider deformity incompatible with normal life. And so somebody who has not experienced having a child with Down syndrome may say, that's compatible with normal life. And somebody who has experience would say, no, this is not compatible with life. Allahu Akbar. So somebody with experience would be able to say very differently. All right, that's the second opinion, right? What I mean is the majority opinion is 120 days. So the Hanafis and some Hanbalis take the opinion that this is up to 120 days that these rulings exist, that she may abort the child for necessity, the mother's life is in danger. They do not allow it for need, like rape, zina, or physical or mental inability of the children. That's only the Hanabila. They're actually the most lenient in why they would allow abortion, but the most stringent in how long. So they're most lenient, but only up to 40 days. Whereas the Hanafis and the other set of Hanbalis say no, it's really only for necessity or extreme fetal deformity, not reasons that would be essentially considered social reasons. Rape, zina, or physical or mental inability to raise children are sort of like, it's not necessarily only social reasons, but they're reasons that affect the mother and typically her mental state.
So even after like 120 days, like let's say like at 8 months, like the mom's life risk is like really high.
Yeah.
And
At any point, if the mother's life is in danger or her risk is very high, all allow the abortion of the child because you saved the life of the mother and the child's life is fihi shak, that there is doubt in it. It's not been born yet. So you always save the life of the mother. That's across the board, and that's under the category of ad-darurat tubihul mahdurat. All necessities override prohibition. It's prohibited to abort a child after 120 days or 40 days, but it's permitted to save the life of the mother, at any point. So everyone allows it after 120 days for necessity, the mother's life.
They have a different definition for extreme fetal deformity or something like that.
So they just gave examples of what is and what isn't. So some of the examples given, let me see if it's written here. Ah, there we go. Here. Abortion permitted up to 120 days or 40 days if an extreme fetal deformity is found that is incompatible with life. So some of the things mentioned is major deformities that would affect the quality of life of the child that is incompatible, such as severe mental disability or physical incapacitation. So both physical and mental extreme deformity. So then they gave examples like things that affect the nervous system. So the nervous system is not operating correctly. The heart is not operating correctly. The stomach is not operating correctly. The brain, the lungs, they're not progressing correctly. And if you see this at a very early stage, and the doctors and the medical professionals say this is really problematic, or we've seen this before, okay, this is signs of this possible disorder, then it is extreme fetal deformity. If they say, hey, everything kind of looks okay, just like the lungs are a little smaller than we expect, it may or may not lead to something, that's everything is taken on a case-by-case basis, right? So you have to sit down, talk to the medical professionals, ask what are the possibilities of the harm? Is this compatible with a normal life, right? So here's the things that they do not include. Deformities which do not spoil the quality of life of the child, such as perhaps an immune system defect that they find. Okay, there is less of this hormone we see that we normally see, or less of this chemical we see that we normally see, means the child may have these types of reactions or this or that, but we have medication to cure that, or we have processes to cure that. Mental slowness, this is where they mentioned Down syndrome, that it would not be considered a deformity that would be incompatible with life. Enzyme defects, right? I'm talking on topics I don't know much of, so I'm just sharing with you the translation of what was mentioned in these scholarly analysis. These are issues which may make life difficult, but are tolerable and can sometimes be cured. So this is really on a case-by-case basis. You sit down with your doctor, they do the panel of tests. Those tests usually take place before 120 days, and they'll let you know, here's all the possibilities of what we see. Everything great, great, move forward. Everything terrible, you can make that decision to abort the child before the 120-day mark or 40-day mark. Unsure, do more research, right? It's like, well, there's possibility of harm or not, do more research. However, after the 120-day mark, any deformity found, abortion is considered killing the life of the child. So all of that research has to take place before 120 days. So a person may ask, so at the 5-month mark, I find out that there's this extreme deformity. We say, قَدَرَ اللَّهُ مَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ. This is the will of Allah, and what He has done is what He has done. Perhaps that child will be born, will not be born. Allahu A'lam. Perhaps that child will be born, and all of the things they thought were problems actually are easily cured. Perhaps that child will be born, and they will be born with many difficulties and riddled with a very difficult life. That is the qadr of Allah for that child. The pen is lifted for that child. They are a person of Jannah, after they pass. And it is a trial that has been given to that parent. And that's so much easier to say when we're standing on the side where we're not that parent. So much more difficult to accept when that is the case of somebody who has to care for that child. But we say, Allahu A'lam, bis-sawab. Allah knows better, and we do not. Maybe that child is the ticket to Jannah for that parent, but it's going to be a really difficult life ahead, and Allah knows best. But typically after the 120-day mark, no scholars allow it for deformity of the child, except in the case that the mother's life is in danger. So examples they gave that would not be allowed would be like a limb is missing or a finger is missing. They'd say that's still compatible with a normal life, right? Okay, your child is progressing, but one arm is not progressing. That's not a reason that they would consider extreme deformity incompatible with life, because they could get a prosthetic arm, right? Different from the lungs not forming, the heart not forming, the brain not forming. All right, so here, okay, we give an example. Doctors say the heart has not fully formed and the child will likely not survive, or they see extreme brain deformity and extreme cases of lung deformity, etc. These would be considered major deformity that would allow for abortion. This is the opinion of modern day scholars. Why? Deformities in the womb could only be detected recently. So you're not even going to hear this conversation about the allowance for abortion because of deformity until medical professionals were able to recognize these in the womb. So the default was, prior to this, abortion was not permitted. Why would it be? How would you have any reason you would know that there would be some deformity in the child? And so really only abortion would occur if the mother's life was in danger, or according to the case of the Hanabila, rape or zina, because she would be killed because of that zina, or the mental or physical inability to take care of that child. But that was all still before the 40-day mark, according to Hanabila. All right. Okay, we already talked about these. See, what happens is I talk and then we actually have slides, but all right. In the case of zina, those who allowed abortion in the case of zina, which is a minority opinion of the Hanbalis, not all the Hanbalis, just a minority opinion of the Hanbalis, refers to abortion due to a woman's fear that she will be killed by her family or community as a punishment or an honor killing. We shared this. The rebuttal for those who disallow it is the case of al-Ghamidiyya. So I don't know of a case of abortion in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but we know of the case of zina that occurred at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ instructed her to keep her child, even though the punishment would be she would be killed, according to the had punishment. So the Prophet ﷺ told her to keep her child. In fact, it's a big, long story, and it has a lot of lessons in it. What you will learn from the story of Al-Ghamidiyya is the Prophet ﷺ was encouraging her to make tawbah and go back home and don't come back and don't get the punishment. The woman, Al-Ghamidiyya, from the area of Ghamid, came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I have committed adultery, so purify me. What she meant is, give me the had punishment. I want to get the punishment of death in this life so I don't have to face Allah on the Day of Judgment. Because if she were to get the punishment in this life, then she is not considered someone who would have to receive the punishment in the hereafter. The Prophet ﷺ turned her away, said, like, go back home. The next day she comes to the Prophet ﷺ, why did you turn me away? Perhaps you turned me away as you turned away Ma'iz. Crazy story. It happened before with another man. The Prophet ﷺ, a man came, said, I committed adultery, give me the had punishment. And the Prophet ﷺ says, you probably didn't. And he turns away. And he's like, no, I really did. قَدْ زَنَّيْتُ. And he's like, you probably just kissed a woman. right? Just go back. And he's like, no, I committed adultery. Give me the punishment. So in these two cases, the two known cases that are narrated in Hadith, where two people, separate cases, Al-Ghamidiyya committed adultery with another man, Ma'iz committed adultery with another woman. Both were married, both would receive the had punishment. In both cases, when they came to the Prophet ﷺ, he turned them away, hoping that they would return, make tawbah, and we don't need to do anything here. And so, in fact, the ruling according to the scholars is if someone uh, admits to you, like an imam is given, like someone comes into their office and says, I committed zina. You don't go take it to the courts. You say, make tawbah and don't talk about this again. Make tawbah and return, because that's what the Prophet ﷺ did, tried to do. But in both of these cases, they kept coming back. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ said, go back, make your tawbah. And, the child deserves to be delivered. The child doesn't deserve to be taken. Their life doesn't deserve to be taken because of a sin that you committed. So she goes the full 9 months and delivers the child, and she comes back and she's like, okay, I've delivered the child, now give me the punishment. And then the Prophet ﷺ says, the child deserves to be given milk. Interesting point. Any wet nurse could have milked that child, given milk to that child. The Prophet ﷺ said, the child deserves milk for 2 whole years. Go back. So 9 months have passed. He doesn't want her to return. He wants her to make tawbah and not come back. She came back. 2 years passes. She nurses that child, takes care of that child. And again, she is very resolute, right? She's like, this is what I want. So she comes back and says, I nursed the child for 2 years. I'm back again. And he gives her the punishment because لا ينبغي على رسول, it's like it's not possible for a messenger of Allah to have heard that something took place and to not take action based on what Allah would have divinely ordained. So he tried his best to say, please go back and don't come back. And she kept coming back. All of this to say, he did not say abort the child because the result would be your death. Right? So this is the rebuttal of those who say zina is not a reason to abort a child, because in the cases where zina took place and death was the inevitable had punishment, the Prophet ﷺ said, the child doesn't deserve to be killed for your action. And Allah knows best. In the case of rape, because the sex was not consensual, the woman is considered ma'adura. She is excused. The normal rules do not apply. She is not sinful. This is not her fault. And this ruling that she is allowed to abort the child by the Hanabila before 40 days is a relief for the woman because of the psychological and emotional damage that keeping the child would cause. This is just an opinion from one scholar. It's Imam at-Tantawi. He supported this opinion 2004. He drafted this into Egyptian. He approved a draft that this would be put into Egyptian law, which would allow a woman to abort a pregnancy as the result of rape. Oh, and he says even after the 120-day mark, Allahu Akbar. Okay. So that concludes our lesson for this weekend. It's 108. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم. What I hope you came away with from this weekend is how amazingly flexible, diverse, and applicable fiqh is to every single situation. Every single situation. I love this category of fiqh, not just because my brain is a mathematical and scientific, it works in that way, but because through the fiqh you see so much mercy. You see so much mercy. For every issue, there is an answer. And for every really complex issue, there's also an answer. And it is not about picking and choosing because we do not follow our desires, but it is about this fiqh just really being able to take care of every single one of its followers. And the reality is if somebody goes to a scholar who is not well read and doesn't fully understand all of the tafsir and all of the opinions and all of the fiqh, you may come away with an opinion that greatly harms a person, that greatly maybe pushes them away from Islam. And so it is on the teachers and the imams and the shuyukh and the scholars to continuously learn, to learn that there's this whole category of contemporary fiqh, and we've discussed these issues, and scholars have actually pinned down their fatwa, and they're sitting in these books of fatwa, but someone may not read that. They're at a stage of ignorance, arrogance. They think they know what they know, and then they're like, oh, Qardawi mentioned this in the 1980s, and I said, and this scholar says, don't take donor breast milk. It's absolutely impermissible. Yeah, that opinion exists, but you might be harming a child, and maybe it's not to say their death is on this person's shoulders. No, it's an opinion, and it's a valid opinion. But had you known this opinion existed, and the European Council of Fatwa in 2004 agreed that this is the answer to premature babies, you'd save a lot of people a lot of heartache. And the fiqh was meant to be able to be this diverse and this applicable for all generations, locations, circumstances. And Allah knows best. All right. Second to last class, we have one more class coming up in 2 weeks, and that's going to be I think it's a great one. It's a sort of a heavy one, قواعد الفقهية. We've taken like 3 قاعدة. الضرورات تبيح المحظورات. Necessity overrides prohibition. In the case of 2 harms, take the lesser. أقل الضررين, take the lesser of 2 harms. And public interest trumps personal interest. These are 3 قاعدة, 3 قواعد of fiqh, 3 maxims of law that so many legal rulings go back to these big pillars. The class on قواعد الفقهية is like all of them. Like here are all of the 12 to 15. There's the kubra and sughra. I don't know how many he'll go through. You guys will see it in your notes, but it's so amazing to see these main legal maxims that almost all of Islam goes back to. They're like the trees, and then there are like 100 roots, right? So the 100 roots are all of these legal rulings. They all come back to this one big tree trunk. And if you know that tree trunk and you know it well, then it becomes more like second nature that of course you should be like, you'll be able to make decisions. Not saying you're a scholar. That's not what we're here to do. You're not going to like make your medical decisions because you're like, I took that contemporary fiqh class. But you will be able to make some decisions in difficult situations. You're going to be at the hospital. Someone's going to need some medication, and they're going to say, hey, but this has something that is not permissible. And you're going to say, but it's a necessity, and necessity overrides prohibition. And then your family will say, no, we cannot. And you'll say, okay, I'll talk to my teacher or I'll talk to a sheikh. But you will have some yaqeen in your heart at that moment that, hey, there's a legal maxim that supports this, and I know I'm going in the right direction here, right? Because when people don't know, ignorance can be so harmful. Ignorance can cause great harm, destruction of life, and even death. And I know that's very dramatic, and typically it just causes a lot of harm. But being aware of the fiqh, and I'll give you my last quote I'll give you is, it was Ibn Qudama, I believe, he said that إجماع الصحابة حجة قاطعة واختلافهم رحمة واسعة. That when the Sahaba all agreed, had consensus over an issue, like we all agree this is the right opinion, then they said that is a definitive evidence. But the more important for this class is, but their difference of opinion was a wide, vast mercy. Their difference of opinion, that they differed, one said this maybe, one said this maybe this circumstance calls for this, maybe this circumstance for that calls for that, created this wide, vast mercy. And that is why fiqh is so merciful, is that if it was just one way or the highway for every single issue, it would be difficult to apply to everybody in everyone's circumstance. And it's as simple as the example of the women going to the grave and later being permitted, or even as simple as the Prophet ﷺ was asked by a man, "Can I kiss my wife?" And he said no to him, and he said yes to him, and it was because they had different circumstances. You cannot kiss your wife in Ramadan because you're a newlywed. That will lead to more. An elderly man asked the same question. He said, "You can kiss your wife in Ramadan because it won't lead to anything. You've been married 50 years." The Prophet ﷺ saw situations and circumstances and answered differently. And that is the work of the scholar, is to recognize here are the different opinions, and here is this person's special circumstance. Let me make sure I give the answer that is suitable to this person, not following their desires or my desires, but following what makes Islam practically applicable for them, and they're not going to run away because it's absolutely impossible. I think I'm repeating myself here, so I will conclude with that. May Allah أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. May Allah forgive me for anything that I have said that was wrong, and may He accept from all of us our studies and our ibadah this weekend, and allow us to come with a slight paradigm shift of the way we understand the law and the legal systems and the fiqh of this beautiful religion. Ameen, ameen, ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Of course.